Good morning all and welcome to the Community Standing Committee meeting for Wednesday the 9th of March. I'd like to first of all thank everyone for making their time available for this morning, councillors and staff, and welcome those who are watching online. Open the meeting with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. I'd now like to call on Councillor Duff to also say a prayer as there is Rural Resilience Council for those people affected by the floods. And I thought, Councillor Duff, at the end we might have a minute's silence for the 13 lives that have been lost in the flood event in Queensland since over the course of time, and also, of course, tragically and sadly, we've lost one of our own residents on Sunday. So if you could be so kind as to do that, that would be lovely. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a prayer for all of the farmers who are across our region and beyond who have had such devastation with the recent flood events. We also pray for all of those people who have lost their lives. We pray for their loved ones and their families who have suffered through this tragedy. We pray for just that their souls may rest in peace. Pray for the recovery and that everybody can get over this tough time, this sad time. And we pray particularly for the gentleman who lost his life in our region recently due to flood waters, and for his family. And we ask these prayers in Jesus' precious name. Amen. And now ask everyone for a minute's silence in honour of the gentleman who lost his life and also those who have lost their lives during this tragic time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Thanks, everybody. Okay, in terms of leave of absence, we do have one request from Councillor Froeloff. She's unable to make it today, so I'll move that we accept Councillor Froeloff's request for leave of absence. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Henson, thank you. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. We have no further apologies. Councillor Duff, would you be so kind as to provide the recognition of our traditional owners? Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to acknowledge country and the land where we meet this morning, the Waka Waka land, and acknowledge the elders, both past, present and emerging. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillors, do we have any conflicts of interest to disclose in relation to today's agenda? No? Okay, we'll proceed. Thank you. Item 5.1 are the minutes of the Community Standing Committee meeting held on the 9th of February 2022. That's at page 6. And it's recommended that the minutes of the Community Standing Committee meeting held on the 9th of February 2022 be received. Do we have a mover? Councillor Potter, second Councillor Henson. Any speakers? Those in favour? Oh, sorry, Councillor Duff. Any business arising, Councillor Duff? It's only in terms of the contents of the minutes. But
I just wanted to ask the question about the, on page 14, the papers to do with the planning scheme. When will they be circulated? The issues paper and recommended amendment, and the state's response was to be circulated to all councillors before a workshop in March.
So I'm just wondering, with that, General Manager, can we deal with that I think we cover off on that in Councillor Henshin's report, don't we? So can we just push that through to 7.1, Councillor? We'll have your question attended to then, if we could.
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's go to the vote. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. I'd now like to welcome Councillor Potter to deliver her Community Arts, Heritage, Sport and Recreation Portfolio Report, which can be found at page 23. Thanks, Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We'll start off with Library Lovers Day. So Library Lovers Day is a day to remember our libraries. So what I might do is actually miss that bit because that's past now. So we'll start with the JP services has resumed in the Kingaroy Library. So it's every weekday from 12 to 2 p.m. at the Kingaroy Library. So please call them for more information on 418 99 256. The library spaces update for Mergen, Wandai and Blackbutt Junior Area refresh. So the junior areas at the Mergen and Wandai libraries have recently been refreshed with large interactive crocodile toys installed in both branches to create a stay and play feel for young ones. The junior area at the Blackbutt Library will also receive a makeover in the coming weeks to freshen the space and make it more appealing for young people in our region. South Burnett Libraries presents Stig Wymus. Now, South Burnett Libraries are excited to be partnering with the local schools to bring the energetic entertainer Stig Wymus to the region on today and tomorrow. Stig is an award-winning audiobook narrator and best known as the voice of Andy Griffith's best-selling Treehouse series. His vibrant and high-energy live shows have become well known throughout Australia and New Zealand in schools and libraries. He has a background in acting, has starred in numerous TV shows, feature films and live theatre productions. Stig's experience brings a unique and dynamic energy and performances. So the South Burnett Libraries will have a stall at each of the shows at St John's, Tabinga and the Kingaroy State School and Crawford School to promote the Borrowbox resources and to answer any questions about the library membership and children activities. We were actually very lucky back in 2016 or 2017 to have Stig do a huge show in the Kingaroy Town Hall, and that was probably one of the noisiest shows I've ever been to, because when you've got that many children from all the schools over Kingaroy and the South Burnett, it was just incredible. So I'm really looking forward to sitting in on some of those tomorrow. The South Burnett Libraries have been successful in securing best-selling children's musician and author Dino Yippity for the South Burnett Partnerships for Kids Under 8's Day event, which is scheduled for the 30th of June 2022. The shows presented by Mr Yippity have been developed to inspire kids to laugh, love and believe in themselves. There will be 2 shows in the morning with Mr Yippity available between performances to talk with attendees and to sign books and posters. As part of the First 5 Forever initiative, library staff have been developing a series of Busy Little Minds kits that aim to provide extended access to subjects that interest children aged 0 to 5. Kits about birds, cats, dinosaurs, dogs, families, insects, shapes and science contain a collection of books, DVDs and crafts that have been curated by library staff. Each kit also includes a QR code that links directly to the South Burnett Library's website so that children and their families can explore a variety of online resources about their topic of choice. This multimedia kit allows parents and children to easily access information and enjoy their favourite interests on many different levels by reading, listening, doing, playing and discovering. The kits, which officially launched in the Easter school holidays, will also be used for the first 5 Forever Storytime sessions at the library and for outreach sessions and playgroups and kindies. Arts. Now that COVID restrictions are starting to ease, we have a few events coming up. Firstly, I would like to mention the Burnett Bands Together, which is sponsored by the Central Queensland Regional Arts Services Network and Arts Queensland and the South Burnett Regional Council. This event will be held on Saturday the 9th of April in the Kingaroy Town Hall forecourt, and it's a free event for all with some very talented local bands. We've got 6, I think, and it kicks off at 5 o'clock on the 9th of April. South Bennett Woodcrafters had their workshop grand opening last Saturday, and it was a fantastic day with many different live demonstrations, and a big congratulations to the South Bennett Woodcrafters on such a wonderful day for the work you have done getting your workshop up to such a wonderful standard and being so inclusive. Next year they turn 30, so we look forward to another celebration then. Community. Also on the 9th of April, the Kingaroy Men's Shed will be holding their annual RACQ Life Flight fundraiser, Dinner Under the Stars. This will be a great event for all, with some very talented locals with the Semp family and Amos, along with our local whip-cracking talent, Jackson Kirko. As mentioned earlier in the library's report, the South Bennett Partnerships for Kids will be holding Under 8s Day in the June holidays, and I'll bring more information regarding that closer to the date. South Bennett Regional Council has secured funding through the Queensland Health Trach system, and in conjunction with South Bennett Arts, Kingaroy Red Ants and the South Bennett Suicide Prevention Working Group, we have managed to secure the Jonathan Thurston Academy, or the JT Academy, to do school visits along with the Mergen Men's Shed, who will also invite other men's shed from around the area to join them. We'll also have a large community event in the Kingaroy Town Hall forecourt on Tuesday the 24th of May with JT himself, along with music and information regarding mental health from our local providers. For this event, Mr Mayor, we're also working with some of the other funding we have for mental health in bringing buses from the outer lying areas into Kingaroy so people don't have to worry, for people who don't have transport, so Proston, Blackbutt, Mergen, so forth. So that will help bring people from the outer areas into Kingaroy for that concert so people don't miss out. Nominations are currently open for our very first South Bennett Regional Youth Council and close this Friday the 11th of March. This Youth Council will be a diverse group of up to 20 motivated young people aged between 14 and 24 who live in the South Bennett or Cherbourg regions. The overall purpose of the South Bennett Regional Youth Council is to provide a forum for young people to meet regularly to express their views on issues affecting them in the South Bennett Council area, increased awareness of the aspirations and needs of our young people within our communities across the South Bennett and Cherbourg area, and provide young people with the opportunity, young people give the opportunity to provide a youth perspective to a council in a structured and formal way, and to facilitate positive interaction between young people, council and the wider community. I'd also like to say here that we have between the 19th and 25th of April, the Binduma, under the heritage, the Binduma Homestead will be holding the Spirit of the Bush with Balladeers and Heritage Muster 2022. This is just off the top of my head, 19th to the 25th, yep. So I think it finishes on Anzac Day with the Anzac Day service. I think there'll be over 20 performers and entertainers on the day. So that should be something to look forward to. And I believe I'm hoping Council will share that information on their page as well. So if it's not already up there. I'd like to move that my report be accepted. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. Very comprehensive report. We have a second, Councillor Henson. Thank you. Speakers?
Mr Mayor, just an update through your chair. Since the report was written, I'm very pleased and proud to announce we have our full complement for the Youth Council of we hit 12 yesterday. So it's an absolute goer, which is great.
It's wonderful news. Thank you very much, Mr CEO. Congratulations, Councillor Potter. And
just on that, just thought through you, Mr Mayor, just on that, so we've got the full complement. So if any other children were thinking about nominating or whatever, is it too late? Can you just explain that further, Mr CEO?
If we have other nominations, we would accept other nominations. But we've certainly got 12 at the minute, and then just see what else we've got in. But we're ready to go. But yeah, we would not accept a nomination. We'd have a look, and then that would be a bit tricky if we have to get into an assessment process. But yeah, no, we would gladly accept all nominations. But given it was a slow take up and it's really picked up pace over the last week or so, and yeah, no, it's really good.
Thank you all. We'll go to the vote. Those in
Oh,
favour?
oh, sorry.
Sorry, Councillor Shoemaker.
Sorry, I just had one question, just in relation to the Youth Council, because I think those insights will be really valuable to our council. Just wondering what the thought process is in terms of how that information will come back to council, whether there's an opportunity to meet with the group about specific issues, or what your vision is there, Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Councillor Potter.
Through you, Mr Mayor, thank you for the question, Councillor Shoemaker. Council will have a chance. Councillors are more invited to sit in on some of these sessions and see how we go. We are doing a leadership program with the youths because we feel that they're giving up their time, so we actually have to give them something back in return for what they're doing for the community. And all the information they bring forward will be coming through to standing, I believe, Peter, if that's correct. I'll probably defer to Peter for this one, but I'm on the understanding that everything they bring forward, if it's related to council and the operations side, it'll go through Peter back through standing. Thank you.
Oh, no, through you, Mr Mayor. No, that's correct. Yeah, any of those things will come back through council.
Okay, thank you. That's an excellent outcome. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. 6.2 is the Business Disability Awards. Can be found at 31. Okay, General Manager. Thank you.
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, so this was just a follow-up. We had a presentation from Business Disability Awards regarding trying to have a regional event. So they are looking at, certainly had a successful events at Toowoomba, I think, for the last 6 years. So looking at moving it regionally to the Gold Coast, potentially Sunshine Coast later this year, but they are looking at a Kingaroy event. So it's really just looking for council support. Talking to the organisers, we are looking that it would be potentially, I say, a 12-month lead time to get the event up and going. It was hoped that it could coincide with the South Burnett Disability and Mental Health Expo, but that was postponed from this month to, I think, date yet to be determined. But we do think this year will probably be too early to have the event, but it's really just laying that groundwork of getting preparation, getting the idea out there amongst the community businesses about the awards, because it will obviously, with new events will take some time to get a presence. So it was really just bringing it back in response from that community engagement day where they had the presentation, and just for council's information, and probably through budget deliberations, if council wants to proceed with sort of supporting an event like this, and we can. Yes.
Thanks, Peter. It's recommended that the committee recommend to council that council provide in principle support for the establishment of a Business Disability Awards event in the South Burnett and continue to liaise with the event organisers to explore options. Do we have a mover? Councillor Potter, thank you. Second to Councillor Shoemaker. Speakers, Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This actually works in very well with our corporate plan. It's with the disability and how we want to make this place, the South Burnett, disability friendly. So I think this works in really well with our corporate plan, and we really have, this is something that I personally feel that we should be doing. Thank you.
Further speakers? Okay, we'll go to the vote. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. I'd now like to welcome Councillor Henshin to provide his Rural Services NRM Planning and Compliance Services Portfolio Report, which is at page 45. Thank you, Councillor Henshin.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Pleasure to bring my portfolio of Rural Services, Natural Resource Management, Planning and Compliance Services report to you. With our Rural Services and Natural Resource Management, with weed management. This has been on the tip of our tongues for the last month with the season that we're having at the moment. And first up, inspection of historic and high-risk Pithinium weed sites and the movement pathways continue. As a priority over the month of February, ground inspection activities will be complemented by Council's planned aerial weed survey to be conducted in early March. Giant rat's tail grass continues to spread at an alarming rate due to exceptional seasonal conditions, the lack of buffer zone establishment in core infestation areas and limited awareness amongst landowners to respond rapidly to control isolated and scattered infestations. Inspection on lands containing core joint rat's tail infestations and adjoining properties continued over the month of February to ensure a 20-metre buffer zone are established and maintained. Given the extent and rate of spread, both giant rat's tail grass and Pithinium weed must be considered significant regional biosecurity issues that will have a considerable negative impact on sustainable agriculture, production and community health across our region in the years to come. It is imperative that the whole of the region's effort is made to contain and reduce existing infestations, respond rapidly to new outbreaks and prevent further spread to clean areas. This will take an ongoing commitment from the South Burnett community, industry and all levels of government. And just on Pithinium, as it is a saying in the rural sector, 20 years seed is 1 year seed is 20 years weed. In the event of Pithinium, from seed to seed is 4 weeks. So that gives, and under ideal growing conditions, which we've had in the past 2 months, the rapid spread of it, and especially within floodways and flood watercourses and that, it's incredible how it can expand quickly. Weed awareness, a 4-week radio and print media campaign focusing on increasing community awareness on new weed threats, reporting and reducing weed seed spread concluded at the end of February. Community feedback has been positive with increased reporting of Pithinium weed and African boxthorn locations and more general inquiries to council officers on weed management issues. Extension and awareness of the single biggest tools in strengthening our region's biosecurity system and building community commitment and participation in shared culture of biosecurity action is critical so everyone understands its importance and plays an active role. Council will continue to build on education and awareness programs to ensure the South Burnett region is more aware and resilient to manage future risks from invasive species. Remembering that Pithinium was once only controlled or relevant in central Queensland, it's a bit like our feral animal environment, where we now have that in our region and it's here to be controlled, and diligence needs to be implemented across our region. In the wild dog and feral pig management, both established pest animal management syndicates are operating well, with the On-Pot syndicate submitting 13 wild dog scalps and the WAGs submitting 7 wild dog scalps. Game cameras were purchased using drought project funding and provided to the WAG syndicate to complement their surveillance capabilities. In the new model for 1080 supply and distribution, the future provision of 1080 supplies are set to change by the end of 2022. Biosecurity Queensland has decided to cease the supply of 1080 solution to councils at the end of 2022. When asked why this service was being withdrawn, officers from Biosecurity Queensland stated the department's decision was in response to landowners and other stakeholders requesting improved access to regulated poisons for vertebrate pest control. Biosecurity Queensland, in collaboration with Queensland Health, has now made the decision to make the transmission from the state control to a private-run system. Under this system, landowners can now access manufactured 1080 baits and have meat baits injected with 1080 solution by a commercial approved operator without any involvement or restrictions applied on its use or distribution by council. Given local government's important role in leading vertebrate pest animal control campaigns, council will still be promoting and providing 1080 solution and meat injection services for landowners participating in coordinated control campaigns. After December 2022, council can still access 1080 solution from a commercial supplier, with Biosecurity Queensland providing short-term funding to assist council in transitioning to these new arrangements. And just quickly on that, and I won't elaborate on it, as General Manager O'May may be able to shed some light on it a little later, but sometimes with some fairly irresponsible use of some of these distribution baits, the community suffers, and the primary producers are the first to suffer. And a classic example has happened with dog-on baits just recently, and I won't elaborate on that because it's in the hands of the Queensland Police. But unfortunately for some primary producers, that's now made another great facility or a great tool that's used in the primary producer section very hard to access because of someone's ignorance in our community. On planning and building, Council is currently seeking the services of a building certifier or graduate building certifier technical officer, with the current increased number of building applications being received. Planning staff are experiencing a noticeable increase in the engagement of consultants requesting pre-lodgement meetings. These meetings have involved an extractive industry and subdivisions. Planning fact sheets are still being drafted and reviewed by planning staff, and there are currently 8 fact sheets under review, with an additional 2 to be drafted. In February 2022, applications received: material change of use of MCU, 2 development applications, an extension to shop and extractive industry, and reconfiguring a lot, RAL, is 6 development applications, which is subdivisions including 1 lot into 8 lots. No applications received for the development incentive scheme. The planning team received an action 68 customer requests, and 4 pre-lodgement meetings were held in February. And the amendment to the planning scheme, Council received draft detailed advice from the Department of State Development, Infrastructure, Local Government and Planning, the DILGP, to Council's request for early interest check. DILGP is still considering the request and have advised there is no indicative time frame at this stage. The Councillor Planning Workshop confirmed for the 24th of March 2022. It is proposed to discuss the outcome of early state interest and check response, communication strategy and draft issue papers. And in our environmental health and compliance, in February has been busy for the environmental health officers with the preparation for the storm season, assisting the LDMG, evacuation centre preparation and training, and COVID response in the community, LDMG and within the council area. And haven't we seen that come to fruition in the last 6 or 8 weeks or so? However, impacts from COVID-related staff absences and injuries have affected work output from the team. Media releases regarding mosquito control were issued having regard to the heavy rain event recently, with the recent rainfall and the recent flooding waters and pooling water provide perfect conditions for mosquito to breed. This can result in more mosquitoes, increasing the potential for mosquito-borne diseases in our communities. Mosquitoes can carry viruses such as Ross River fever, Barmer forest virus, and dogs can also contract heartworm. On that, just this morning on the news, unfortunately, a gentleman passed away from the just recently released on the media with Japanese encephalitis from mosquitoes. So that's a tragedy in itself. So I think that brings to the forefront just how much this can affect our communities. And the recent flood events, that's something I'm sure that over the next coming weeks with floodwaters and stagnant waters that we need to take very diligent notice of that. So with that, I'd like to present my portfolio for the month of February. Rural Resilience, Natural Resource Management, Planning and Compliance be accepted. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Henson. We have a seconder. Yep, Councillor Potter, thank you. Speakers, Councillor Shoemaker.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the report, Councillor Henson. Just a question, General Manager O'May. I'm not necessarily across my mosquito controls, but I just wondered, are there things that council can do to actually, spray or mitigate the mosquito issues around the area at the moment? I know just yesterday afternoon I was outside with my kids for a little while, and they are next level. I actually was carrying the off spray with me, and we were all wearing it, and I even sprayed the dog with it, and they were still attacking us. So and we've got bug lamps and everything. So I'm just wondering, is there anything that we can do in that regard in terms of, I know in some coastal areas they spray areas, or just mindful of what we might have done in the past.
Thank you, General Manager.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so there's 2 different types of treatment for mosquitoes. So you can do the fogging that you'll see, the highly visible fogging around the streets is using an adulticide, so that will kill the adult mozzies there. Temporary relief for just those adult mosquitoes. Most of the treatment you see is for the larvae when in the standing water. In areas like ours in the rural areas, because there's so much, particularly at the moment, the ground's soaked, there's so much standing water in paddocks, and that is very difficult to get to those identify and treat those larvae, because a cycle will run, say, 4 or 5 days, and you'll have from eggs to larvae to adults. So identifying and treating those areas is very difficult because it is so widespread. In the coastal areas, you can actually target your programs around your tides, because most of those are the mosquitoes that breed in the tidal areas. So when you know your height of the tides and the receding, you can actually work a program. So it's that is a lot more effective in those areas. So what the message we're really pushing is whatever treatment we can do. Like, you could spend all sorts of money doing adulticiding, and they'll just keep coming back. So certainly targeted areas, and we are working particularly with the Japanese encephalitis at the moment, being very topical. The vector for that will breed in fresh water. So different diseases, different vectors for mosquitoes. So that is, and for us being a pig, heavily pig industry area, something we are closely monitoring. So working with Queensland Health, if they did identify any risk of that, then we would having a really targeted area around an area. We are looking at whether we can do some treatments, particularly sort of looking at with Swickers being right in town here. So that's an area we are focusing on. So whether we, but the big message is that personal protection. Whatever we do, when conditions are like this, you'll get bitten by mosquitoes. So cover up, fix your screens, wear the personal protectant, and that, because you won't find all of the little paddocks. The grass is so long, the water's holding so much longer, and it is allowing that 5 days, 5, 6 to especially with the hot weather, the breeding cycle will speed up. So normally it's not an issue for us because the water will disappear so quickly. But at the moment, that's why we're just seeing that real uptake. So so we're really just be looking at that targeted, but across towns and rural areas, that there is going to be mozzies.
Just a supplementary question. So in the cooler months, do mosquitoes tend to not breed as rapidly as in the warmer months? Like, just mindful of the time of the year,
Yeah, so definitely that life cycle slows down through the cooler months. So they won't reach maturity as quick. So you actually have the water drying out before the cycle can go through. So yeah, hotter, warmer weather certainly speeds up that life cycle, and so yeah, it is a vicious cycle. So they get to adults, they bite you, they go and lay more eggs, and so yeah, so cooler weather, that is generally. And for us, we probably don't get as much rain in the and standing water through the cool areas, cooler times.
Yeah, thank you for the explanation. I've certainly learned a lot, and thank you for those conversations with Queensland Health, and certainly considering what a targeted program could look like. I certainly appreciate the challenges of the issue across our region. So thank you.
Councillor Henson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'd just like to elaborate a little more on Pithinium, and I've had numerous phone calls in the last couple of weeks. Pithinium is actually quite an attractive plant for those that don't know what it is, and in the gardening sense, it can be a fine stem plant with fine leaves on it. It is a light green colour. It has a pretty little, dare I say, pretty little off-white creamy coloured flower. It can be, and as Manager Jarvis has seen plenty of it in Central Queensland and North Queensland, can be quite pretty, but let me tell you, in the rural sector, it's a pretty damn big pest. People say how can control it. It actually is quite easily controlled with a lot of things, and I can just elaborate. They're trying to implement an insect species that might be able to have some effect on it. Along with that comes other issues. As we know, sometimes when you bring insects or animals into control, one problem, you create another one. So that's on the agenda as far as insect species, and they have 2 rust pathogens that they're trying to implement as well, that rust gets into it and can take the plant out. There's also a numerous amount of chemicals that can control Pithinium, but of course it's where it is in agricultural land, and certainly in the cotton industry, there's a lot of chemicals you can't use. So as much as it's easily controlled, there's so many circumstances that hinder its control in certain environments within the rural sector. So that's just touching briefly. And anybody that's not sure, by all means, please contact our officers or anybody that wants to know more about it or what it looks like. But you will see it rapidly if it's on roadways and waterways. you can walk across the top of it. It becomes that prolific. Just and quickly, while I have the mic, a question directed at General Manager O'May. Could you, and I'm happy to take this question on notice in relation to the doggone baits, is there any directive from Council in relation to them at this parent time, or can we just expect to hear or see something in the next month?
General Manager O'May.
Yeah, through Mr. Mayor, in direction in relation to what probably didn't quite understand the question.
Oh, sorry, General Manager Pete. In relation to, is Council still handing out, and is primary producers have access to dog-on baits, or is that just been put on hold because of recent circumstances?
Yeah, no, I'll have to take that on notice. But we still were supplying the dog-on baits, from my understanding. Are you saying that we're not supplying them anymore?
No, that's fine, and I'll certainly let you take that on notice, General Manager O'May. It's just primary producers have, and because of some incidents that's happened in the community just recently, I think we'll just leave that on the table, and happy for you to take that until next month, because there's been some legal implications there outside of Council, absolutely nothing to do with Council, nor the distribution of it, but it may have an impact on Council's supply and distribution of dog-on baits.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so that probably was, with the changes, is always been a concern, and even with 1080, that's why it was so heavily regulated. Is that the misuse of it, as I think Councillor Henson leads to, risks the removal of it as an effective treatment. So that is probably a concern that we share, that if it is misused, then the powers that be will take it out of the system.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that Council, people that have, and for people that are listening, and for the rest of the chambers, and correct me if I'm wrong, Manager O'May, but in any of that is issued by Council, those producers go on a register. So it's not just willy-nilly handed out, as some people have made some assumptions that we should do this or we shouldn't do that. But there's a very good system in place where baits of any shape or form in the varmint section, and feral pig management and wild dog, is on a register. So it's very well regulated and very well controlled with that register. Is that correct?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Yeah, so whether it's baits that we're injecting, or whether we are providing dog-on baits, which landholders can purchase, there are stringent restrictions that they sign up, that these are the conditions that the baits are supplied, that they must adhere to, as far as placements and collection of baits after the period of time. Definitely recorded what properties are too. So yeah, certainly a lot of conditions around that, and everyone that we supply baits to, whether it be pre-manufactured or injected baits, sign up that they will adhere to those conditions.
Thank you, Gentleman. Could I make a suggestion, Mr. Mayor, Mr. CEO, that in a media release, could we perhaps, as Council, portray it out there that with these wild dog and feral pig management and baits, 1080 and dog-on baits, could we perhaps put in a media release that it is controlled and everyone is on a register? There's been some confusion or some misconception out there of the abuse of some of this chemical, which and baiting, which has absolutely nothing to do with Council, because it is controlled in a very, very precise manner. And I think some people have, and perhaps in the next month we'll see what comes. And as I said, I don't want to elaborate on it because it's in the hands of the Queensland Police. But I would like to see a media release and just stating that Council has a very good system in place and a register of all distribution of chemicals and poisons in the varmint and pest management.
Thank you, Councillor Henson. Duly noted, and we'll action that. Okay, Councillor Duff.
Just on that, I was of the belief that you could just get those dog-on baits at places like, the ag outlets, like at bean growers or nutrient. So I think the confusion is around the fact that perhaps Council's regulating it, but it's not being regulated through those other outlets. so we get blamed for something that's not really our issue. I think
Oh,
that-
exactly, councillor Duff. Hence is why I'd like to state that Intermediate Release Council doesn't control it. You can buy those baits in several other places, and in some circumstances, there's no register system or not as an effective register system as what council has in place. So I'd like to just see that implemented to make sure that people are very aware that council is diligent and very professional in its distribution of these chemicals and baits.
Councillor Duff.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I just wanted to ask a question of General Manager O'May, just how we're going with negotiating with Cherbourg and the Minister around the Pithinium issue and outbreak at Cherbourg.
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, so we've sent correspondence off, and I'm not aware of any reply yet. So signed by both Council Cherbourg and South Burnett. So we've forwarded that correspondence, but just haven't had a reply yet. And just on the, I think we were just going to mention that the aerial surveillance of that had been put back with the recent flooding. So that should be over the next 2 weeks that we hope to see that the helicopters up in the air to over that area. But yeah, we haven't had a response back from the department or the minister yet.
So, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Okay. The planning scheme amendment, councillor, you raised that previously. Did you have any questions in relation to that?
Yes, I did want to know when that we would see the draft issues papers that you had suggested we would see prior to the workshop.
Yeah, thank you. Through Mr Mayor. Yeah, so as it's in the report, the meeting's on the 24th, and we're just finalising that issue paper and getting the responses back from with our planning consultants at the moment. So yeah, we'll get that out prior to the meeting. Just haven't got an actual date for you yet, but we'll get something out to you prior to that meeting on the 24th.
Thank you, General Manager. General Manager, just in terms of that matter, the report identifies that an early interest check request has been sent to State Development, to the Minister's office. We haven't received a response as yet, just confirming that. And are we expecting to see a response prior to the 24th of March?
Through Mr. We were hopeful, but the state haven't indicated again when they will respond to that. So they did suspend the period for a time, but yeah, just haven't indicated. So yeah, I'm not confident. We hope we might, and we can follow up with them. But yeah, we just haven't got any indication on timeframes for that.
Thank you. And does the response to the early interest check delay our process? Does it hold us up from progressing?
No, not particularly. We can still proceed with those, with the workshop and our issue side. If it is a protracted delay, it may do, because that we're trying to find out that the issues that they want us to address in the planning scheme amendments that are affecting state planning policy. So if we went too far down the track, then it may mean backtracking a little bit if we have missed addressing issues that the state wanted us to address through the planning scheme. But yeah, certainly the work in the background will continue. Like, it's not that we'll stop and wait for that. It's just if it, and I imagine there's just been, early in the year with the COVID and then with the flood, whether there just has been delays in the feedback. So we don't expect that will be a massive time frame on delays. Obviously, when we've put in the formal planning scheme amendments, it can take months and months to get replies out of the state, I think. But yeah, there is a delay. Hopefully won't be extensive at this stage.
Thank you, GM. I don't imagine the early interest check is a large process for them in terms of reference to the state planning policy. Mr. CEO, would there be any issue with council through the office of the mayor issuing a letter to the Director General in relation to seeking some advice as to when we can expect a response on that? I just want to get on the front foot. We don't want to get to the point where we're still sitting here in 6 weeks' time and we haven't got a date. In light of the fact that we are trying to go into recovery phase as a region, and a lot of the developments that we've got are waiting on an outcome for these consequential amendments. So we'd like to ensure that the state are at least aware of that.
Yeah, no issue from us, Mayor. So, yeah, we'll be just drafting her up and getting her off.
Can we just perhaps make a note to that effect, and if we can get that off in coming days, that'll be much appreciated. Thank you. Thanks, General Manager O'May. That was all the questions that I had. Does anyone else have anything to add? We'll go to the vote. Those in favour, carry unanimously. Thank you all. Okay, so 7.2 is the Natural Resource Management Operational Update. It's at page 48. And General Manager, we'll get you to lead us through that if you could. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So just further from Councillor Henson's report, the Natural Resource Management Update is presented in pages 49 and 50. So the African boxthorn funded project is coming to an end. In fact, we're doing the acquittal there now, which is quite good to see that come to a conclusion. And, you know, the outcome reports will go back to the funding authority, so that's quite positive. The Queensland Feral Pest Initiative project is taking shape, and we're liaising with stakeholders and partners in that funding project. So that's being formulated as we speak now. So we're confident that's progressing in the right direction at the right pace. The stats obviously are all presented there, comparing them to the same time last year. Numbers go up and down. You know, local impacts with flooding and things slow down movements of cattle through Coonabarabran and whatnot. So, you know, those stats are there for you to have a look at. The and really, I'll just take questions if there are any in relation to those other statistics. Customer requests are pretty consistent. We hit 50 this time last year and this time this month. So we deal with those customer requests according to Council's normal expectations and policies, and we're quite diligent in responding to people and acting on those in that NRM space and whatnot. And yeah, so thank you, councillors, and I'll take questions if that's appropriate, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Manager. It's recommended that the NRM operational update be received for information. Do we have a mover? Councillor Henson, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Duff. Questions, speakers? Councillor Shoemaker, thank you.
Just want to acknowledge the enormous amount of work that goes into responding to those customer requests. I know I've received quite a number of responses from your team who've kept me in the loop with things, so I really do appreciate that. Just thought I'd take the opportunity to ask, are there any key themes or anything that you're seeing coming through with the customer requests that you've received?
Through you, Mr Mayor, no, I don't delve into that. We don't analyse them in that space. So I think we're just responding to requests as they come about, which could be anything from, I mean, a lot of those are things like cat traps, which I know Council has a current question and we have a response being formulated on that. And I think we are transitioning, as you realise, with the restructure and the change in staffing. That would be the big comment I would make, and that's impacting on how we are operating, because we've got different people in that space, but it's positive actually. So I'm really pleased that we are dealing with that change, and we're just waiting to see how things transition. But I'm very confident that we're addressing all those customer requests and that transition stage quite well.
Yeah, thank you. It just certainly want to acknowledge the work that's going into making that happen, and recognise it's not always easy. I guess my thinking was more around, you know, if there's targeted areas or things that are a concern to the community, which I know will come more out of that analysis, and we're only very starting this process with the maturity of our customer request systems. You know, those learnings will be much more organic. But yeah, just thought it was good to ask the question, because it's clear there's consistency there and that those requests are consistently coming through. So appreciate the work that you're doing.
Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just wanted to compliment the Parks and Gardens team on their customer request process. And I had a customer who was quite upset since the flooding, and yesterday rang up and said it was a fantastic response from our team. So just wanted to give you a big shout out for that drainage issue in Wandai at Kookaburra Lodge. So thank you very, very much. Great feedback.
Thank you, Councillor. Just noting there, Manager, number of cattle through Coonabarabran sale yard are increased up on this month last year. Any particular reason for that? It's just a timing thing, or?
Mr Mayor, which, is that to do with the,
Yeah, it just got under the Coolabunga sale yards, 1,042 head, 860. So what are we up
Yeah.
there? About 1,182
Yeah.
head, which is probably what, 20%?
yeah.
What's the indicator? Is that indicating anything?
Now, Mr Mayor, I did notice that myself, and I haven't followed through with a reason for that. So I'll have to take that one on notice. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Perhaps
Yeah.
Councillor Jones
I'm
might
sure
be
the
able to.
councillors who in the cattle industry probably know better than I do.
Yeah, that's probably a good point. Councillor Jones, what's happening at the Coolabunga sale yards? Thank you.
Not as much as I'd like to see happening, Mr Mayor. That's, if you want my honest truth, 1,042, that, we're in a pretty good market for cattle now, so it's an obvious, I think it's an obvious explanation. You can't keep them in the paddock at the price that they're getting now in the sale yard, so that's obvious. But if you have a look at the 4,050 that's taken 7 months to sell, that only works out less than 600 head per month. And we're asking to put a significant investment into those yards, and I fully support it. But I'd certainly like to see it grow above 600 head a month if we're going to significantly invest some money there. So we've got a lot of work to do there. I'm glad you highlighted the 1,042, but if you look at it across the board, they have 2 sales a month. That's 300 head a month on average, 300 head a sale. Then you put it into context with Roma and Dalby and Warwick and all the other ones that we're compared to. That's multiplied by 10 times at every sale that they have. And I think it's an unfair comparison for community people to be comparing and saying, oh, council at Warwick, council at here are doing that. So we just need to be aware of the figures that are going through that Coolabunga sale yard when we have the discussions. Fully support the rural sector and how we move forward and try and improve those facilities for these people, I don't know. But those numbers there I would like to significantly, see increase significantly so that we can justify the expenditure that is being requested at the moment.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. Keen to just keep a spotlight on that manager in terms of tracking those numbers moving forward for the reasons that Councillor Jones has highlighted in terms of council's any prospective future investment in those yards needs to be weighed up against, obviously, the community benefit. Okay, well, Councillor Shoemaker?
Yeah, and certainly, while I agree with the sentiment, I also recognise the work that the working group's doing around Coolabunga Sale Yard. And in my time in business, and I was only young when I came to business, what I have learned is to make money, you need to often spend money. And it's pretty clear that there hasn't been an investment in those yards for a very long time. So it's good to see and good to hear about the work that's happening with simple things like the plumbing that I know have been an enormous issue for a very long time, fixing those troughs up. I think our focus really needs to be on raising the bar at that sale yard, because I think with that will come the people. And often what I've heard from those in the rural industry is that many have left over time because of those issues. So it will be good to try to provide some confidence in those yards and bring local residents back. I do agree that local people need to support the services that we offer if they'd like to see them into the future. But I'm excited about the work that's happening around Coolabunga and the opportunities for the future in that regard.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Certainly, as a business consultant for 20 years to the ag sector, I know all too well what it takes or makes to what can make or break a farming enterprise. And a facility like this, I would expect that the working group will be looking at market research in terms of potential demand. We can't assume that the demand will be there just by upgrading the facilities, but we certainly need to make sure that we are looking at prospective demand and weigh that up against the investment required. I think that's probably part of your conversation there, Councillor Jones, but back to you. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr Mayor, thank you. In just response to that, that was never my intention of making those comments and about not investing, but I just wanted to make sure, and Councillor Shoemaker highlighting the working group, fully support, we've got good people on there. But we've got to make sure before you expand and invest in business, you have to be confident that the people that are utilising that facility are going to follow you and take you along, and they're certainly indicating that. But Councillor Shoemaker's comments in regards to a lot of people leaving, when you dig deeper, there's a whole lot more reasons why people have left that facility. So we've got to be aware of the whole situation. So my comments weren't regarding not investing or following along and trying to improve. That wasn't my intention, and Councillor Shoemaker highlighted the other issues, but fully supportive, but how we get there and what we do, and being responsible for the whole of the region and all different reasons. Yeah, so we just got to be careful.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Jones, and I'm sure our members of our working group will take that on board, and we'll look forward to seeing that information come forward in future months. Okay, was there anything else on that update that anyone had any questions about or observations? No, well, we'll go to the vote. Those in favour, carried unanimously. Thank you all. 7.3, placement of shipping containers on private land. That's at, that one's at page 52. We've got Manager Mike coming forward. Good morning, Manager. And General Manager O'May, over to you, or through you to Manager Mike, to give us an overview of the report, if you could. Thanks very much.
Through the Mayor, yes, this matter has come up through a bit of a contentious issue between two neighbouring properties. It's been to the Ombudsman, and as a result of that investigation and clarification through the Ombudsman, we decided to instigate a process, because we never had a proper process in relation to shipping containers, and I wanted to get Council's thoughts in relation to the management control, particularly in the town areas. As councillors would probably be aware, there's probably not too many commercial properties within the area that doesn't have a shipping container on it for storage purposes. They're very convenient, they're very secure, and they serve a great purpose. There's quite a few shipping containers being erected on private property, and with that comes a bit of a discourse between neighbours in relation to the ugliness or whatever of the shipping container. Generally, they don't like the look of them. They're a fairly bland container, and many containers. One of the thoughts that I've only came across was in relation to private property. I've done a bit of a drive-by around the towns, and there's multiple coloured shipping containers and various properties, and some shipping containers at the rear of properties look quite okay, and others look terrible. So what I've done is I've put a report here. I wanted to get council's feelings. We've done a bit of analysis in relation to other areas and what they do with shipping containers. Basically, as council would be aware, that shipping containers generally are used as a short-term storage item, and whether council wanted to look at that in relation to the planning scheme, as well as having any controls over shipping containers. The investigation revealed that shipping containers are a building in accordance with the Building Act. We've had some legal advice in relation to that they are a building structure, and therefore subject to building applications and so on. However, it is a mighty task to regulate that sort of that sort of construction. So I've put that report together. Some thoughts having regard to the issues that we're facing with the adjoining properties, and I've recommended to come back in May with some further and more particular information for council, and particularly that we're having our planning scheme review coming up, a workshop. I thought, well, it may be pertinent to look at shipping containers, whether council sees them as being desirable, necessary, or not suitable for certain areas. So that's the contention of my report, to bring it to council's attention, to fulfil the requirement of the Ombudsman that we investigate that matter and look at policies and procedures to control to whatever extent the council desires in relation to shipping containers on private property.
Yeah, thanks, Manager. I think on this one, because it's a fairly open topic at this point in time, at least, we should probably have a discussion around this before we jump into any motions. Just in leading that, Mr. Manager, are we talking here about shipping containers on residential zonings? So we're not really looking at rural residential. I imagine if we open that up, that's a massive can of worms. But we're limiting this discussion to residential zonings. Is that correct? Not rural, not incorporating rural res.
It's through the Mayor, entirely open to council. I would thought that limiting it to the township areas would be preferable and controllable. However, council may have the thoughts that shipping containers in rural areas that are close to boundaries or that sort of thing may be an issue, but it's entirely up to council. My thoughts are open. It's a large body of work to control, and at the moment we don't have the resources, quite frankly. In relation to the issue of, you've noticed that I've advertised for another building certifier or cadet certifier or a technician. Last year we were unsuccessful in getting a building certifier. We had a guy for a short term, and he finished up at the end of the year and sought greener pastures. At the moment I'm increasing the work through our consultant building certifier to cater for the increased workload. So yes, from a management point of view, shipping containers is about the last thing I need to deal with, but we have to take it seriously, and we have to come up with a reasonable approach, I believe, and throw it open to council to give me some directions.
Yeah, thank you, Manager. And thank you for your work on this, to you and your staff in bringing this forward. It's quite a comprehensive report, and you've done a really great body of work in terms of looking at what other councils are doing, where they do have policies. I found that very informative as well. I guess my observation would be that to extend it, from my view, to rural residential would certainly create an amount of work that I can't see how we'd ever be able to handle that. Certainly in early stages, residential, keeping it to the residential confines might be a sensible approach. Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Wow, won't this open up a little can of worms? Look, I think it's probably timely that we look into this with the issues that we've been having lately. Look, I do feel that aesthetics are probably a big part of shipping containers, because I know people that have shipping containers in some of the smaller towns around, the villages around, and you don't even really notice them, to be quite honest, because they blend in with their fence line, with their housing, the house roof and things like that. But, we're going to have to be extremely careful, because if we're going to go, and I do believe this should only be in the villages and the towns, and not go outside that area, Mr. Mayor. But this is something that we're going to have to be extremely careful in how we go about it. And as Manager Mike alluded to, we're going to have to resource this as well. So this is going to cost us more money to bring a policy forward like this to make sure people are compliant with this particular issue. Yeah, it's going to be a hard one, whichever way we go.
Councillor Schumacher.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just looking over this, I probably just want to acknowledge I do have a couple of shipping containers on a rural property, so I don't know whether I should declare that to council. If that is an interest, they are used for storage, largely because I couldn't afford a shed.
I would suggest, Councillor, it falls under the category of that you have a no greater or lesser interest than anyone else, because there are millions of the little devils out there, and it's a common issue amongst, I wouldn't say every resident, but yeah, it would be no greater or lesser.
Thank you, CEO Mark, and I do tend to agree. Look, with regards to this one, really appreciate the work that has been done, and hearing you, Manager Mike, in terms of the fact that you know, you are under-resourced. It's a shame that we haven't got that building certifier. It is such a wonderful opportunity, but I recognise the challenges in the industry. It's not certainly unique to our council. I really, in terms of advice, I kind of like the Gladstone Regional Council's approach because, as you've discussed, amenity seems to be a big one of the challenges. And I know, having lived around in town for a number of years, that is something I'm thinking about my neighbourhood and the people that I talk about. That is something that I think does come up when people take a lot of pride in the way their homes look. And I like the fact that Gladstone's is kind of saying, look, you can have a maximum of one. You must put it behind the house so it's not visible from the main street. Should be screened by some sort of landscaping or suitable structure and painted consistently with the colours of the property. I am worried about the resourcing and the regulation of this policy. If we go, and in terms of bringing information back, that's probably what I would really like to understand more of, whether this is a key while it is important to our community, is this a key priority that we really have the luxury of investigating right now? Probably the one thing that I am thinking about more than amenity that is an issue, and I know certainly for my in-laws in Banarkin, there are shipping containers being installed on properties, and then windows are going in them, and then doors are going in them, and then beds are going in them, and then people who are coming for weekends are staying for weeks or months, and I understand the issues with the housing crisis, and I certainly know we've talked about the issues around, trying to provide some level of leniency to people who are experiencing homelessness and issues with affordability. So I'm not making any, judgments in that regard, but I am thinking in some instances where people are trying to move into these, what would our stance be like? And in terms of making sure they're safe and fit. So is that around securing them in some way or doing something? I don't necessarily want to smack everybody. I don't understand everyone's situations, and certainly I'm very fortunate to be in a situation where I have a roof over my head and recognise others aren't. But yeah, I'm probably keen to understand if some of these councils have a stance on some of those things. I recognise too, Gladstone, Toowoomba, Western Downs, they've got a lot more resources than we do in this area as well.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors? Councillor Jones.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'm sorry, but I don't want to leave out rural residential simply because when I get complaints about shipping containers, that's the area they come from, rural residential. Not too often I have had complaints about them, and if I was a rural residential person and we put a policy together for residential only, first thing I'd say, well, mate, why am I any different? Because the residential word is used. I'm a rural residential ratepayer. And in my area, a large portion from the southern end down from Nanango down is one of the largest rate base payers, second to Kingaroy, I believe. Now, I'll stand corrected on that, but the rural people, Councillor Duff's got some issues up her way as well with people with containers and all that sort of stuff. So I'm not really interested in having the conversation around just residential, because most of my area, and if I'm representing the region, not just my division, but the region, because I know it's an issue right across our region, rural residential people have got a legitimate complaint when they're complaining about people that are dumping, and Councillor Shoemaker's touched on it. I can take you into one certain patch of Banarkin and it is just full of containers. I was there 3 days ago looking at the floodwater that's run down through them. The drainage is pathetic in Banarkin. That's another conversation for another day. But it is not just restricted to residential. And I'm sorry, Mike, and I know you didn't want to, and Mr Mayor, I know, and it's all being said, we'll open a can of worms, but if we're representatives for our region, I believe we should represent the whole region. And if it's rural residential, that I believe, and I'm only going on my experiences with council, is that's where I get all my complaints from, is people out on 5 acre blocks that have got beautiful houses, absolutely magnificent houses. And then you go next door and they're grass this high and containers and people living in them, and I've been in council since 2016, and I reckon I started in March and the complaints started coming in April in my area about containers on rural residential. So that's just I'm happy to have the conversation, but no, I'm not really, unless we include the whole lot. If I'm being fair and I'm representing everybody in the region that I work for, that's my stance on this particular policy. So, yeah.
Thank you, councillor. Anything? Other councillors haven't had a chance to speak yet. Anything further? No. Okay. I'm going to progress this. I've got a proposed motion to put up just to try and move this forward, because you have done a fair bit of work on this, manager. And this is really only just to kick the ball off, I suppose, get the process rolling. I'm just going to change that if I could. Thanks, Bree. In that first line, if you can see it on the screen there, committee, council takes a risk-based methodology in developing a policy. My understanding from that is that means that we're making a reasonable assessment. We're not enforcing this as being, well, everyone's permanent. If we use the term residential zone properties there, General Manager O'May, does that then not pick up the rural, or would we need to put the word rural in there from a zoning point of view?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, if you're mentioning the word zone, then I would take it that's residential zoned.
So that would pick up the rural residential?
Yeah, it's probably just a bit ambiguous. 50% could argue that it does, and 50% would argue that it doesn't.
Well, thanks, General Manager. So on that basis, to residential and rural residential, in light of Councillor Jones' comments, to be equitable, enabling the postal shipping container on a property incorporating the following. Bree, could we change it for a period of no greater than 180 days, which is 6 months? I'm worried about the workload if we start going around and every 3 months trying to find containers that have been there. For me, this is about targeting more permanent ones. And can we change down the bottom to the July rather than the May? I'm just, in light of the conversations I've heard today, and after the word committee, put a comma, and then the words including a report on resource implications, because anyway, I can talk to it once it's there. So I just want to put that forward to start the ball rolling, and it picks up on Councillor Shoemaker's comments in relation to the Gladstone model. So that's probably a blending of what we've had recommended to us and the Gladstone model. So I'd now like to move that. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Duff, thank you. So I'll now speak to that. I've read the report and looked at some of those other observations the staff have made on what other councillors are doing. And I've heard what Councillor Jones has said, and I feel the same. This has been topical in our community for some time. So I think we need to act not with haste, but certainly with caution, but at least start to get the ball running to do something on these shipping containers. We don't want our region to be looking like a dumping ground for that, particularly where people have invested a lot of money in beautiful homes and they've got a pile of shipping containers next door, which devalues their properties. So I wanted to put this forward as a starting point, just to give the staff some guidance on what we'd like to see in that policy. Have a draft come back with that sort of content in it, and then we can pull that to pieces, review it, have a look at it, understand what the resourcing implications are going to be for our staff, and then make an informed decision. I think with the budget cycle we're going through between now and the end of July, it would be too much work to try and get this done. I think we're better off to leave it until July or August. Let's get the budget done and then consider the matter after then, would be my proposal. So that's what's behind the motion. Further speakers? Councillor Henson, thanks.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, look, I'm supportive of this. There's just one question I have there in relation to maximum of one shipping container or railway carriage. We all know that on many rural residential, there will be several shipping containers where they might put a roof or a structure across them. That will be a curly one, and some of those are well done, well constructed, and some of them, of course, are the exact opposite. I think this is a great starting point, but I think the maximum of one shipping container, perhaps we can look at that, or you know, there's perhaps another dot point to put there in relation to the number of containers and what their use may be for, because you will come up against some criticism and some conversation with rural residential where they do have several shipping containers for a purpose other than what's been discussed. And some of them are well done. Some of them are well constructed. So, yeah, I think that's just one point we perhaps look at.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. That's a good point, isn't it? Maybe we could just change that, Bree, to consideration of the appropriate number of shipping containers on the property, rather than defining it as one. We will let the staff give us some advice around that in light of Councillor Henson's comments. Consideration of an appropriate number of shipping containers, and then take the word maximum of one out, and then just make that containers plural. Are you comfortable with that, Councillor Duff? Yeah, thank you. We'll just leave it a bit more open that way, Councillor Henson, so we're not restricting ourselves to one. That can be considered as part of a draft policy. Yeah. Councillor Duff, over to you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I do definitely think we need to get a policy happening, but I'm just concerned about the wording located behind the house and not visible from the main street frontage, because in some cases that is their house, and that would be in like a place like Highsville, there would be shipping containers that are their houses. So I just think that because I know that Highsville, for example, is it's residential, so we're targeting places like Highsville. So just wondering what we can do about that wording there, or how we would address that, and indeed the opening, as has been suggested, a can of worms when you're talking about people actually living in shipping containers.
General Manager O'May, your thoughts?
Yeah, three, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just a couple of points. The first one was just going back to the rural residential zoning. We need to look at the township zoning too. If we talk about zonings, then see Highsville, for example, is zone township. So by that resolution would not necessarily be picked up in here. So yeah, if we're identifying specific zonings, then we need to call so whether it's more, rather than saying zoning, it's residential, rural residential use of properties. Because Highsville wouldn't be picked up if we stick to specific zonings. Also, your commercial properties in town, if you're looking at any commercial properties, industrial properties in urban areas. I just wonder, the more specific we get in the resolution, the more we tie our hands to as far as the policy. So yeah, just trying to keep it as open at this stage so we can look at some of those things. But as far as, let's say, use of a house, or whether it be a shed, then there will still be the building Code of Australia requirement. So you can't actually use a shipping container for a house unless it is up to that code. Whereas it can obviously be used as a shed, but again, there's building requirements that it must meet.
That being the case, again, I know I keep tweaking this, but I'm just trying to get something we can work into, something that's going to work for the staff. Bree, just on third point there, located, can we just broaden that out then? What are your comments there, General Manager? Located in consideration of visibility to road frontage. That again just leaves it open for the staff to come forward with how they'd like to present that, I think, rather than prescribe that. Are you more comfortable with that, Councillor Duff? Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. Yep, happy to keep reshaping this until we get something that we're happy with. Yeah, Councillor Jones.
Yeah, so Councillor Duff, did you, just on your last comment, did you say that you were worried? And this is not about, to me, this is not about targeting Banark and Highsville or whatever. It's a regional view, but did you just say then, in your worry about Highsville, for instance, is people are living in the containers? So located in consideration of visibility to road frontage. So we've taken that house and that out. Like, yeah, right. Sorry, that happened. Just quickly, while I'm going, risk-based methodology. Would it be fair that those words there, risk-based methodology, is what you guys will use, and that'll encompass all this? Like, you'll go if I was going out, like Councillor Henson just alluded to, and there's 2 nice containers and they present them well and they build over the top and it's neat, tidy, and all that sort of stuff, and it's on a rural residential block, neighbours and all that. An inspector would say, well, that's pretty good. I'm happy to leave that. But if you go across and there's 3 or 4, would that be the way risk methodology? So that would cover the screens by landscape, consideration of appropriate number of shipping containers and all that. So we're on the right track, aren't we?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Yeah, I certainly think so. Having that risk-based methodology, you could build into some more criteria. So it might be land size. So you've got some of these blocks that are 1,000 square metres. So you might have the risk on that is high, so you might allow 1 container there. But there are rural residential blocks, 10 hectares or 40-acre blocks or something. So, which is 1 container on a 40-acre block is going to be a lower risk than a container on. So yeah, it would just allow to build in, that sort of take that common sense approach that the impact. The risk is just sort of not trying to consider what the impact of it is going to be.
I think it's probably, even with that one at the end there, painted with a consistent colour, maybe we should just say colour scheme considerations, again, for the staff to look at that without being too prescriptive this stage. Yeah. Full stop and then delete the rest. Thanks, Bree. Are you happy with that, Councillor Duff? Yeah, okay. Well, let's keep working
Yes,
on
Mr. Mayor.
moulding something that the staff can... This is just to give the staff something they can start with, a bit of guidance to come back with. Yeah, Councillor Shoemaker.
Yeah, and certainly I think it's a good extension on the recommendations that the staff have already provided in the report. So thank you for your work on that. I just think in terms of point located in consideration of visibility to road frontage, we should add a neighbourhood amenity, because obviously that's where a lot of the complaints are coming from. It's that aesthetic neighbourhood amenity that people are concerned about. And my other comment was just in relation to the further recommendations that the staff had made on page 57. I fully support, once we have a policy, obviously operational procedure, comms plan and communication, e.g. fact sheet, etc. I think those things definitely must happen. Just wanted to ask the question, in terms of the review of the installation of shipping containers on private property as part of this planning scheme review, just noting the conversation we've just had and that project currently underway, just was seeking your advice as to whether it would be too soon to be looking at our planning scheme, but being that we are doing that planning scheme review, probably what's meant by that point, and what would you need from council to consider that in the review process?
Manager, that's a good question. I don't want to be jumping the gun here and doing something that's then going to conflict with the planning scheme.
Through the Mayor.
Your thoughts there? Thank you.
The issue of the relationship in relation to the planning scheme is the planning scheme can regulate in relation to identifying properties or areas or zones that are suitable or not for that sort of for the regulation to be enacted, such as maybe the planning scheme could regulate that containers are not allowed in township areas. So that's where relationship comes in. So that's on the negative side. The positive side, it could regulate that they are subject to they're allowed in an area, in a zoned area, subject to a policy that is developed. And I think that it's timely that we did look at the synergies, and I haven't explored all that, but we need to look at the synergies there so we don't get caught up with any legal issues in relation to the planning scheme saying having no aspect in relation to shipping containers that may interfere with a building approval for shipping containers. So that was the thought process, is that it's timely, and the more you think about planning schemes, and people of the submitters put information in relation to car parking, for example, and things of that nature. The more you think about it, there's more aspects that may come into it that we may discount and we may include. So that was why I just wanted to have that aspect covered.
Yeah, I think, and in covering that, I'm just wondering, just keep tweaking this a little bit more, Bree, at the end there, on resource implications and relationship to the planning scheme.
Yeah.
Can we add that, please? Yeah. Just at the very end there, Bree, just backspace that, and relationship to the planning scheme. Full stop. Thanks, Bree. Yeah, thanks very much for that advice. Good question. Thank you, Councillor. General Manager O'May.
Yeah, I was just going to have just a comment on that. So, to be clear, at the moment, if someone puts a shipping container as a Class 10, a storage dwelling, a storage unit, and they can meet their boundary setbacks located, whether it be residential, rural, any of the property. So currently they're not regulated from a planning point. So if they can comply with the regulations for no different to a shed, they're putting a Class 10A, it's a container as a shed. If they can put that in place, then they can get a building approval at the moment. So it certainly does need to be addressed through that planning. So there's nothing to say you can't have a container in your backyard if you can comply with all your setbacks and building requirements and use it as an appropriate as a storage as a Class 10A, not a dwelling. But yeah, so at the moment it's perfectly legal to have them as long as they comply with all those other requirements.
Thank you, General Manager. Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. So my concern is if you have a person in town who's got a container on their property for greater than 180 days, if we're looking at this type of thing, if they might be building a house, they've got the container there for storage. We all know houses now at this time are taking a lot longer than 6 months to build. So what would be so we've got to really consider things like that as well, because we know the container will go at a certain time once, down the track, but so we've got to make sure there's that consideration brought into it as well.
Is that something we could take on board there as part of that policy development, Manager?
Through the Mayor, yes, absolutely, we take that on board, and that'd be a consideration in relation to the temporary occupation of that or temporary use of that container, because it would then be storage and ancillary to that building approval or development approval. Yes, we certainly take that on board.
We could keep adding to this, but I'm very keen to probably just lock it down, and that if you can make note of that so that we could pick that up, perhaps where there's exceptional circumstances in relation to certain types of activities where you could extend beyond the 6 months. Happy if we just document that. Councillor Potter, yeah, thank you. All right, Councillor Henson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, Danita, Councillor Potter has touched on it. I think the one thing we're going to do, and when you say a can of worms, the $4,000 and $5,000 shipping containers that you can purchase today are immaculate. They're in good condition. And I know a property in one of our villages that has 3 shipping containers that they've strategically placed on their block, and they've done a wonderful job in incorporating them into their property in that village. I guess the concern we'll have is these $1,500 shipping containers that are absolutely disgraceful, and there's how many of them in the South Burnett, and what do we do with them? It won't be a can of worms, it'll be a hornet's nest.
It's a hornet's nest, all right. And clearly, we're going to have reasonable expectations if we do bring in a policy about the time it will take to work through the implementation of it. We're not going to be able to get to every shipping container in 1 year. It'll take a long time to work through the process. So, thanks, everyone. Well, are we happy just to get this up as a starting point? We'll go to the vote. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. I think it's well overdue for morning tea. It's now 10:52. Move a motion that we break for morning tea. Thanks, Councillor Henson, as always. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. We'll resume at 11:10 a.m. Thank you. Okay, I now move that we reopen the meeting at 11:17 a.m. Do we have a second to Councillor Henson? Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. 7.4 is a material change of use for 8 short-term accommodation units at Evelyn Street, Kingaroy. It's at page 58. And Manager Lyle, would you be so kind as to introduce it to us? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, through the Mayor. In relation to this report, it has been prepared by the Senior Planner with Council, and I'd just like to acknowledge my staff before I go on. I'll just take this opportunity. I note yesterday was International Women's Day, and I do appreciate the women that I have working within my team. They do a wonderful job. They provide a lot of experience and expertise for me. And I think our rate, I just did a calculation this morning, we have 57% of the staff within planning, building, plumbing, environment, waste, and what else we do, are women. So I'd just like to acknowledge that and the work they do.
Well said, Manager. Well said. Thank you very much. Yeah, excellent observation. Yeah. No, I was going to say it perhaps explains why your department functions so well, I would suggest. Yes, you've got some very capable women in your department, for sure. Yes. Okay. Righto. Can you run us through the report? Thanks, Mike.
Yeah. Through the Mayor, yes. Thank you very much for that. Look, this application, a short-term accommodation application, is impact accessible. It's located in a low-density residential zoning. The report's there for councillors to have a view over prior. It's basically there's 2 levels, and there's 3 units on the floor ground level, and the upper level is units 4 to 8. They're 2-bedroom units, and there's a 2 one-bedroom unit and 1 2-bedroom unit on the ground floor. 3 submissions were received with this application, basically from the same owner, which is adjacent on a residential property, which is a sole occupant, a single-storey dwelling. The submissions related to residential amenity, the built form, privacy, noise, and traffic access and parking. So the assessment was undertaken and having regard to those issues, and they've been addressed in the report. The report supports for additional accommodation within the area in the South Burnett. Low-scale developments is influenced by the ad hoc style development that happens with short-term accommodation, but it is ideally located close to other facilities, Department of Education, Q-Build facilities, and so on. Conditions were imposed to ameliorate those bulk issues and to address the submitter's concerns, and councils may refer to the plan, the actual site plan and so on, to see how the building faces faces the street and has the driveway on the opposite side to the submitter's property, the distances from the boundaries from the submitter's property that has largely a garage and a carport attached, a garage and shed, the garage attached to the dwelling, which is on the side closest to the property. The amelioration issues considered include deeper landscape planting, fencing to the side and rear boundaries, private open space areas in the upper areas to the southwestern side of the building, so it's not overlooking the adjoining property, and there's separation distances as well. So we believe that, on balance, that those issues can be ameliorated to the extent that it shouldn't cause undue concern or alarm, and the application is recommended for approval subject to those conditions that I've outlined.
Thank you, Manager. I'll just also point out for the committee that from a conflict of interest point of view, just in case you hadn't noticed, probably have, but at page 77, the details of the applicant are disclosed there. At page 77, if councillors just had any concerns around that. So if anyone knows of the applicant or has concerns about conflict of interest, it's certainly not too late just to put your hand up now, otherwise we'll proceed. So I think we might just have use the some of the liberty that comes with a standing committee to have a discussion about this before we actually get our motion on the books. Councillor Potter, your thoughts?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. First of all, I'd like to say thank you, Manager Mike, for those words regarding International Women's Day. Councillor Shoemaker and myself managed to attend a function up at St Mary's yesterday with Melita Smith regarding her business, and it's just incredible to hear about her story. So, but I digress, so let's get back to it. Just would like to ask, for starters, this is a fantastic application, and the fact that we've got person with disability accommodation there, or PWD, it's well needed in our area, and we all know that. Just curious as what denotes long-term accommodation as opposed to short-term accommodation and the difference between the two? Thank you.
Through the Mayor, look, councillors, short-term accommodation is normally identified as accommodation through backpackers, motels, and that sort of accommodation where tourists and travellers seek accommodation for a short period during their stay. Outside of that, there's no real definition of long-term accommodation. It's certainly not regulated. We do have it's a term used in relation to identifying the type of activity that's undertaken. So it's not a regulated activity where if somebody was there for 12 months or 2 years, that council would indicate that was going to be an issue. But certainly it's just it's a way of identifying the use of the premises that motels, backpackers accommodation and the like would come under the guise of a short-term accommodation because of the turnover, frequent turnover.
Thanks, Manager. If I'll come back to Councillor Potter, shortly, but in the conditions it's got on page 60, Gen 6, the use of the premises is limited to accommodation consistent with the definition of short-term accommodation as defined in the planning scheme. But it's going to be available for long-term rental. So if we have people who are living, working in Kingaroy, it's a normal long-term rental arrangement. Is that correct? There's no restrictions on that?
Through the Mayor, it's certainly not regulated through. We don't regulate that occupation. It'd be very hard to identify, someone that was short-term or long-term, and some people come and go, but we certainly don't regulate that. It's just a term used for definition purposes, and council has never regulated that undertaking.
Thank you, Manager. Yep, happy with that, Councillor Potter. Thank you. General Manager O'May.
Actually, I could just go through the definition of short-term accommodation in the planning scheme. So short-term accommodation is a premises used for providing accommodation of less than 3 consecutive months to tourists or travellers. A manager's residence, office or recreation facilities for exclusive use of guests if the use is ancillary to, does not include hotel, nature-based tourism, resort, complex, tourist park, there are other definitions. So it is providing accommodation less than 3 months to tourists or travellers is a short-term definition. The other difference that you will see with short-term accommodation as opposed to a normal dwelling is lack of washing machine facilities. So generally, you won't notice washing machines in your motels and those sort of things. So generally, if from a building classification, if they start putting those washing machine facilities in, then you click over to the Class 1 dwellings and that. So between a dwelling unit and a cabin, I suppose, for accommodation is that washing machine facilities and that. So.
Thank you, General Manager O'May. That certainly clarifies that. So this is really holiday stay as accommodation, isn't it? Short-term, less than 3 months. So we're not talking long-term units here. Just to clarify for council. Yeah, General Manager. Manager, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Through the Mayor. Yes, the operation will be managed by the adjoining premises, the adjoining management of that accommodation will be managed through the adjoining premises there. So it would be available, ideally located for short-term accommodation. However, it doesn't preclude somebody who was staying there at a longer term, council would not, officers would not see that as being detriment to the amenity of the area.
Thank you. That puts it in context for me now. Thank you. Clarifies. Thanks very much. Further inquiries? Councillor Shoemaker.
Yes, I think it's a really exciting project. I just wanted to ask in relation to some of the conditions here. From what I seem, well, from my understanding, they seem like basic conditions. I just wondered if there's anything that council should be aware of in terms of the conditioning of the development that's sort of out of the ordinary or requires a little bit more than what maybe another development of this nature would. Just trying to understand that they're kind of very standard conditions based on what's in our planning scheme. I read through them, but just would like some more information about the conditioning of the development. Just a summary.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'd probably just point out on page 59, there is just the reference to amending the plan. So these conditions, yeah, as you said, there's lots of standard, but looking at the, as Mike said before, ameliorating those concerns of the neighbours. So looking at screening the upper level windows, which will be over second story window looking into the backyard. So screening those to provide privacy for the adjoining neighbours, and articulation of the building. It is a large building. So just that form, trying to have some articulation, whether that be by varying materials, colours, to break up just the large wall that will be. Noting that, yes, a two-storey house put in there would still be look over the fence, and there's sheds in the road. But yeah, that's probably just of note. Is those sort of things were added to in response to the submissions that we'd received.
And just a supplementary question. So, and the applicant at this point in the discussions that we've had can meet those conditions?
Yeah, we don't envisage that being an issue. We see them as relevant conditions.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Ever reasonable and relevant, I think the word is.
Yeah. Councillor Duff.
Just a question just on that. Do we run through those proposed conditions that are going to council with the developer before it's actually brought to council, or are some of these? And in the past, I know that there's been shocks to the developers when they see the actual conditions. So do we now have a more of a structure where we actually talk those conditions through?
Through the Mayor, it's not a formalised structure, but we do have ongoing consultations with the applicants in relation to some of their when we come back with information requests, and we ask an information request on how they will ameliorate. For instance, the built form, it might be a plain built building, and we might ask them how they will do that. And generally, they might come back with a proposal, or indicate that that it's not feasible. But there are those discussions, but it's not a formalised part of the process. It comes about when we first see a development and we have a look at it and assess it, and have initially when we have our pre-lodgement meetings, we'll get some indications of what the development is, and they'll get some indications of what conditions we will likely like to impose, and that's in the pre-lodgement area. Subsequent to assessment, if there are particular issues, sometimes we might issue an information request on occasions, and they will come back with information either to ameliorate that request or to provide better and more particulars about how they're going to meet the conditions of the planning scheme code. Thank you.
Thank you, Manager. I like, just want to observe, I like the car parking requirements. I think you've got 13 car parks required with 2 PWDs as a minimum. I think that's really good. One of the things I've noticed down the coast with these types of facilities that there's never sufficient parking. You've then got people parking out on the footpaths on the streets in front of other people's homes. So congratulations. I think staff should be acknowledged for that. It's setting a much higher benchmark and standard than what we see in other areas, which is great. Anything else? Any other questions before we get this one on the books? Okay, so we've got the recommendation there as presented, that the committee recommends to council that council approve the material change of use for 8 short-term accommodation units and proposed access easement at 3-5 Evelyn Street, Kingaroy, described as lot 13 and 14 on SB 212946, subject to the following conditions, conditions as presented in the agenda. Do we have a mover? Yes, Councillor Potter, thank you. A seconder? Councillor Shoemaker, thank you. Speakers? No, everyone's comfortable? Okay, we'll go to the vote. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. Thank you, Manager and General Manager. 8.1 is the Waste Management Portfolio Report at page 104, and as Council's, in Councillor Frolof's absence, I would hereby move that it be received as presented. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Duff, thank you. Any speakers? Questions? No? Yes. Councillor Duff, thank you.
Just on the page of the report, the 104, it just says it's a legislative requirement under the Waste Reduction and Recycling Act 2011, whereby all waste disposal sites must have a weighbridge installed by the 1st of July 2024. So does that mean that all of our waste transfer stations have to eventually have a weighbridge?
Through the Mayor, that relates to landfill operations. So, for instance, Nango doesn't have a weighbridge, and we're making an application for a funding for a weighbridge and transfer station. There is a trigger in relation to the number of tonnes received. The legislation has been increased in recent years, which would mean that Mergen and Wandai would be other facilities, if we continue to use them into the future for waste disposal, would require a weighbridge. There were previous discussions with my predecessors with Department of Environment and Science in relation to getting achieving some dispensation and push forward. We're endeavouring to have further discussions in relation to those areas. We did get a concession in relation to Nanango, in relation to the amount of waste received, and the DES agreed that we would be able to put that forward till next year. However, some of the discussions in relation to requiring other sites has yet to be determined. So it's only the landfill sites and not the transfer stations. And it all relates back to the levy in relation to, they want to have the precise data in relation to levy collection and waste going to landfill and waste being recycled. And so that's the reasoning. It's only related to the sites and goes back to the capacity of each site. And we'll be having further discussions about Wandai and Mergen into the future.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Manager. Okay, any further speakers? If not, we'll go to the vote. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. 8.2 is the Environment and Waste Services update at page 105, where it is recommended that they be received for information. Do we have a mover? Mover for that? Councillor Jones, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Henson. Speakers? We'll go to the vote. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. 8.3, South Bennett Regional Council Waste Assessment 2021 at page 109. Manager, would you mind giving us an overview of your report? Thank you.
Through the Mayor, yes, this waste assessment, I promised Council last month that I'd table the assessment. It took a while to get the actual report from the consultant. There was some checking and some fact checking and so on. However, I did allude to the report in previous council meetings where councils may, if you look at the first page on page 112, the big heading there is that recycling, organic compostable waste and waste are running at roughly 30% each within our wheelie bin. So that tells there's an indication there that there's quite a bit of, the 66% of our waste could be taken out of our wheelie bin and not buried at our tips, and there's a saving there. And I've introduced the report, put the report in with also for council to keep in mind in relation to when we do the waste workshop, because it's very relevant about how, in relation for council to make decisions going forward, how we treat and manage waste, and having regard to council extending the waste contract, the meeting in January, resolving to extend the waste contract and investigate the recycling component is a step in the right direction in relation to reducing the amount of recyclable materials that could be otherwise disposed of at the landfill.
Yeah, it certainly tells a story, doesn't it? Thank you, Manager. Okay, so we've got to start. Yeah, well, let's have a discussion about this. Yeah, Councillor Shoemaker.
Yes, thank you for including the assessment. I did find it a really interesting read, and even in terms of determining some of our behaviours across our different communities, you can learn a lot, I think, from a community about its waste streams, and just things like obviously containers for change has helped, but clearly there were still some of those sort of containers still found in our waste, so opportunities there. I agree though, wouldn't it be just absolutely incredible if we could divert that 66% of waste from landfill and develop strategies to do so. I just wanted to ask a question. So on page 129, in conclusion, there's a number of recommendations there in terms of opportunity to divert waste. It's recommended that if council elects to extend their offered curbside services in the future, that consideration be made for identification of barriers to optimal presentation behaviour at household level, early and clear consistent community messaging, inclusion in the waste education strategy with clear goals and initiatives, and ongoing waste assessments. So I guess my question was just in relation to how we're going to move forward and embed some of these things, and I guess the discussions around that will happen through that workshop. But certainly, you know, in terms of future assessments, I think this, I'm not sure if one has been done before that we can benchmark against, or if there's a plan to do more of these into the future. But there's some of my thoughts, really. How are we going to embed some of these learnings, and what is our plan looking ahead in terms of doing more of these audits?
Through the Mayor, thank you, Councillor. Yes, I haven't got the information with me about whether we've done previous audits. I believe we have, but I don't have that information. General Manager may correct me there. But in relation to moving forward, absolutely, we would. I would see that we'd be doing annual waste bin audits to inform and develop policies, and also, Councillor, you alluded to the workshop. That is precisely the ideal time for councillors to look at all these issues and look at the barriers and workshop. You know, the idea would be to workshop all these ideas and to see if we can incorporate those in our waste management strategy. Previous report alluded to the applications for a waste management strategy review and getting strategies aligned with future state government requirements in relation to, you know, waste reduction, climate impacts, reduction in impacts in relation to the environment. So all these issues will come together, and if we're successful in that grant, that'll be absolutely marvellous. And the waste workshop is one of the first steps, and those issues that were alluded to by Envirocom is absolutely needed to have the data and the analysis to better inform council on which way we go, and how also to inform us how the public respond to our media campaigns and to our education, I guess, in relation to waste and having a different view about waste because waste becomes a cost rather than it's a liability. So yes, it is to better inform, and thank you for that question.
Yeah, thank you. I absolutely agree. And I think it's this sort of information in the public realm too is really quite interesting, like, because clearly some of our waste, I know Kingaroy's facilities here are incredible, and I've watched, for instance, that electrical waste component grow from what we had was one skip bin where you could put your electrical waste in. I think last time I was out there, I counted 5 or 6, and they were full. So it's wonderful to see community behaviours, you know, as those opportunities come about, do change. I just, if it's possible, General Manager O'May, to see the previous report that's been done, I'd be really interested in that information. If it's able to be circulated, I think it'd be good context in the lead up to the waste workshop, which I really look forward to. So thank you for your work on this, really enlightening.
Other speakers? Councillor Jones.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Congratulations on the presentation, Mike. Fantastic. And with these figures and all that sort of stuff and this information, would it be reasonable to expect, or have we started a comparison to extend by recycling a third of our materials that go into landfill now, the length that it'll extend our waste facilities and the cost and all that sort of stuff, so the financial, by extending our waste disposal sites out, how much that it will benefit the council and compared to how much it would cost to implement a recycling system across it. So is that possibly the next step, or have we started that process?
Through the Mayor, that is the next step, absolutely. Having the data and then looking at what it's costing us at the moment and the analysis of the cost per disposal will inform council and for better policies and procedures down the track.
Excellent question. Thank you, Councillor Jones. Thank you, Manager Mike. Okay, so we have the recommendation that the report be received for information. Do we have a mover? Councillor Potter, secondly, Councillor Jones. Thank you. Further speakers? Councillor Shoemaker.
Yes, I just wanted to point out too the opportunities there for garden materials and those FOGO food waste. Interesting to read that some percentage, like I cannot believe you sorted through 750 kilos of waste in Kingaroy, for instance. And it was interesting to read that in the food waste stream, that some of that was actually still in containers. So, you know, from a degrading point of view in our landfills, like those kind of learnings could be really interesting in communities like ours. Certainly I know worm farms and those sorts of things are on the rise, but just we've talked a little bit about FOGO, and I just wondered if we were looking at going to have a look at the Lockheed Valley FOGO trial or something similar to that. Just wondering in terms of that FOGO space, if there's any learnings or insights that you might be able to share that have sort of happened. I know it's a fast-moving space at the moment, and you're at the table and with many of these conversations, and I just have a great interest in that area.
Through the Mayor, thank you, Councillor. Yes, in relation to FOGO, there are some trials happening, and particularly the Lockyer Valley trial. I've been there to have a look and meet with the managers down there and to have a look at the trial. There are a lot of issues that need to be developed, and that's what the trial is identifying. It is like, from a positive point of view, it is getting the education to the general public in relation to changing that space with waste. And I know myself, I'm in the space and I recycle and I have worm farms and things like that, but some people don't see it necessary, or and as you alluded to, that waste audit indicating that the containers are full of scraps or things like that could be otherwise utilised. So the FOGO is a very exciting thing. They are a very exciting operation project. They achieved funding to do it, and it is a little bit resource intensive from what I observed, because they have to the issue is once they get the waste to the tip site, then you've got the issue of contamination. So they're pulling out plastics and things like that, and that's labour intensive. So I guess out of that trial we'll develop some better ways of, better, more efficient ways of doing that. They do have a very passionate officer down at Lockheed, and she's a lady who came from Victoria, and she has, in relation to the number of sites they use, so they have it. They virtually have the sites identified where the waste is coming from, the FOGO waste. Now, having that data is good because, and just this is anecdotal, but from her, is that she's been able to identify that, say that house XYZ was using the FOGO bins but not correctly, and then she's gone back and done an one-on-one educational component with those people, and achieved a change in their behaviour. So that's one of the good things. It's labour intensive, and once people understand it, people don't understand that how recycling works, and I guess once they have that understanding of what they're actually committing to, they're actually saving the costs at the other end, the deep end we call it, where the pit is buried and everything gets covered and never to be seen again. So that is certainly an interesting project, and I think that'll move forward with development. And I would encourage councillors to attend to the Lockheed Valley and have a look at that project if they have the time.
Yeah, certainly. The other thing that I really liked about the local Lockheed Valley is they're doing a lot of videos and tutorials on YouTube and these sorts of things where they're actually, tipping out somebody's waste bin and then talking about what's in it and how they could do this better. I'd love to see us, and I know we've got a lot of things on the cards, but I'd love to see us take some of this data and make it meaningful for our community in those ways. So I do plan to bring some ideas to that workshop about how we might be able to communicate some of this, so that, for instance, I did read there's large amounts of recyclable paper and cardboard and stuff. There are options to use some of our existing facilities to recycle those things, and just trying to make that connection for people as well, I think would be a really good outcome from this report, making it meaningful and communicating it to the team.
Through the Mayor, I'd just like to add, on a positive note, we've been without a waste management coordinator since December when Powen left, who was a very experienced officer. We have a new officer. We went through an interview process, and we've got a new officer due to start in mid-April, I believe, and that will certainly be able to move forward with these projects and with the team, and that is a positive note. So,
Thank you, Manager. Okay, we'll go to the vote. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. 9.1 is Councillor Duff's Rural Resilience, Parks and Gardens, Property and Facility Management and Indigenous Affairs Portfolio Report. Can be found at page 131. Thank you, Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So in Parks and Gardens, following the recent rain received throughout the region, council staff are busily working to keep on top of the mowing in all towns and villages. Staff in Kingaroy, Mergen and Wandai have just completed spraying the growth inhibitor Primo Max to assist with slowing down the growing process. I would like to mention how well Wandai is looking at present and congratulate the staff on the great job they are doing maintaining the main thoroughfare of the town. The Mergen Cenotaph Gardens have been planted with Petunia Scarlet Red in readiness for Anzac Day, and adjoining gardens will be planted out in the coming weeks. In aerodromes, regular inspections are continuing at both aerodromes with no significant issues reported. The quotations for the feral animal fencing closed on the 7th of February 2022, and Council has awarded the successful contractor. On-site meetings are scheduled in the coming weeks to keep progressing this project. Dams, Bjelke-Petersen Dam is currently looking at a picture with the dam now reaching over its capacity, 127% in the height of the last rain event. The Day area has been heavily impacted with some shelters and picnic tables still currently underwater and only accessible via boat at this stage. Following the dam filling bookings and inquiries have increased significantly for family reunions and special aged birthday parties due to the variety of different accommodation options. BPDM hosted 140 retired Royal Australian Electrical and Mechanical Engineers for their annual general meeting from the 25th of February to the 1st of March. This group cannot speak highly enough of the facilities, council and the current management. Local entertainment was provided on the Saturday night, which was well received, with lots of dancing and laughter taking place. The Peanut Van and Moffedale Ridge Winery were on hand, showcasing some of the local produce available in the South Burnett. On departure, the RAME group presented the Mergen Hospital Auxiliary Committee with a cheque for $2,000 raised over their stay. This will go towards the new community centre video link for specialist visits at the Mergen Hospital. Badooma Dam hosted the annual Yellow Ballet fishing competition in early February. It was great to see the return of this comp following the cancellation in 2021 due to COVID. Nominations were capped to 500 and some new systems put in place, such as online registration to help assist the committee to comply with COVID mandates. The Badooma Dam Fish Stocking Committee also released over 50,000 fingerlings during this weekend, which were supplied by our 2 local Mergen fish hatcheries. The committee would like to express the support and cooperation of council towards this event, and especially thank staff, councillors and dam managers who contributed prior and over the weekend in assisting to help make this event a great success. Rail trail. Major damage has once again occurred on the unsealed section of the KKRT from Mergen CBD to Gympie Regional Council boundary. Council staff are in the process of seeking quotations from qualified suppliers to undertake damaged work following council approval. Property and facility management. South Bend Regional Council and OTM Planning Group Sport and Leisure has commenced work on the Kingaroy Memorial Precinct Master Plan. This master plan will be looking at the Memorial Park, WJ Lang Memorial, Olympic Pool, Dog Park and surrounding parking. Council officers met on site last week with the consultants to introduce the features, layout, maintenance and structural concerns within the park and pool areas. The community engagement plan for the Kingaroy Memorial Precinct Master Plan has been prepared and actions for initial communication to stakeholders has commenced. In coming weeks, Council will publish engagement opportunities and community survey. Contractor Hawley Constructions Proprietary Limited has been back on site to finalise disability ramp on the new pavilion to meet building compliance requirements. Additional footpath will be installed to the toilet block to help improve pedestrian access and movements between the buildings and toilet facility. NC Weber Building Services has commenced work on the council-owned shop fronts in Mergen. To date, all the linings, glazing and security bars have all been removed and exposing some beautiful windows on the heritage-listed building. New glazing and cladding to the external walls have been installed. Works are on track and scheduled to be completed by the end of March. Expression of interest for leasing the shops will be issued during March. Council has commissioned the detailed design of the Wandai swimming pool water play area. The relocation of the equipment shed is out for quotation and works planned to commence after the pool closes on the 18th of April. This project is scheduled over 2 financial years as Council has a small window of opportunity to engage contractors and deliver works on site when the pool is closed for the winter period. Monjul Hall re-roofing tender closes on the 10th of March and Monjul Hall re-stumping tender closed on the 2nd of March. Council property officers have been working with 5 community not-for-profit organisations in February to assist them with applying for grants to improve their facilities within their lease areas. In most cases, groups require landowner consent forms, proof of tenure and letters of support from Council. Council encourages community groups to plan their projects in advance and not to leave everything to the day before the grant is due. Rural resilience. Blaze Aid continued to do an amazing job for our farmers. Before the latest flood event, they had 45 farmers registered. They had started on 16 properties and completed 4. They have cleared 29.2 kilometres of fences and rebuilt 16.2 kilometres. I think that they will probably be redoing most of that work. It is fortunate that their team is already in place and can start work as soon as they can get back on the ground. In the meantime, they have been mowing and doing other work locally. I had the pleasure of helping to provide one of their meals with the Mayor's wife, Ros Otto. It is great to see local groups, service clubs and individuals helping out with meals and food for the Blaze Aid workers. If anyone would like to help, the contact is Ron Murphy on 0414088251. Indigenous Affairs. I've spoken to CEO Zala about the support from South Burnett Regional Council throughout the flood events that affected Cherbourg. CEO Zala expressed great appreciation and thanks for the efforts from our council. He said that he always feels like the two councils work really well together. I think that is great feedback, and I'd like to thank the local disaster management group for the work they have done with the Cherbourg Council over the recent flood events. And that concludes my report. I'd like to move that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Potter, thank you. Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, it's great to see that Ramey was in town for the third year in a row, bringing with them 150 veterans over that 4-day period. So Ramey stands for Royal Australian Electrical and Mechanical Engineers, and they're just an amazing group of people, and I look forward to their function next year when they promise they're going to have more and it's going to be even bigger. But yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just noticed in my report that we've talked about the Merg and Cenotaph gardens being planted out, but I was just wondering about the other gardens across the region, because I know we made a commitment to the Kingaroy RSL sub-branch that we would be have that garden looking schmick. Are we planning to put, you know, those particular scarlet red plants in all of the areas close to the cenotaphs, or what are we doing across the rest of the region?
Thank you, Manager.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Well, as I indicated to Council in the recent update, we haven't specifically identified what plants we'll put into the other towns, other than I mentioned Mergen, because that was specifically asked. But if there's something you want to do, please feel free to put it forward. But all the public areas and cenotaphs will be just maintained and presented, you know, to a high quality, obviously, as part of Anzac Day. So, and that's just normal procedure year in, year out. So I'm not sure if you want specific changes, please put them forward, but it's just business as usual, to be honest, because our supervisors and coordinator are acutely aware of the importance, obviously, of the event and how the place should look.
Councillor, yeah,
Sorry,
I could just clarify, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, Manager, there was correspondence from my office in relation to the plantings in Kingaroy Memorial Park. We had given a commitment, I'd given a commitment at our meeting that we'd had, that we would make sure we had flowers there in those two garden beds, you know, as you come through the pathway. So if we could just follow up on that, that'd be great. Thank you. Yeah. Sorry, Councillor Duff. Yeah.
I just assure you, Mr. Mayor, just the question I guess was, the Mergen area, it always looks fantastic because they do have that scarlet red. So what you're saying is that that's just specific to Mergen, that we don't do those specific flowers in other areas?
Well, off the top of my head, I don't know what they're putting in at Kingaroy. I would have to just clarify that for you. More than likely, if I had to make a guess, I'd say they probably put the same things in because they would just be buying bulk quantities. But I can't be 100% sure on what's going in, but they will be fresh plantings in time for them to bloom and look very presentable on the day. So, but what type, I just can't answer that, I'm sorry.
Manager, without making too much work, hang on, Councillor, if we could perhaps just circulate an email, maybe just flick out an email to all the councillors across the different divisions. We've got councillors going to Anzac Day events right across the region, maybe just with a quick summary as to what plantings are happening in each of the major town parks and memorial areas. That'd be great. Can we do that as an outcome from that? Happy with that, Councillor Duff?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Mayor, I think we've got the Anzac Day report coming up next week, so what if we put a paragraph in that as well?
That'd be great. Yeah, thanks, Mr. CEO. Happy with that, Councillor Duff?
Yes, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Good question. Important that we have that looking lovely for Anzac Day. Thank you, Manager. Okay. Anything further in relation to the report? No, we'll go to the vote. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. 9.2 is the Parks and Gardens update at 1:34, and the recommendation is that that be received. Do we have a mover? Councillor Henson, second to Councillor Potter. Speakers? Councillor Schumacher.
I certainly acknowledge so much work going on, and the report's great. I can see it's certainly come a long way. I just, in relation to the Banarkin Park renewal project, I know there had been some preliminary discussions and planning and stuff done with some of the stakeholders down there. So I just wanted a bit of an update as to where that project might be at, because I also know we had the unfortunate situation with the toilets and things as well. So just, yeah, keen for a bit of an update as to where that one sits in the timeline of priorities at the moment.
Through you, Mr Mayor. There may have been discussions, but nothing formal at this point with my involvement. I have been having conversations with residents and the relevant councillor, and those conversations have been quite positive, and we're framing up to get to a point where we can meet on site and prepare what I call a concept plan, an initial concept plan of that park, and that includes the toilet upgrade, which is essential. And once we get to that point, you know, that concept plan would be prepared and brought back to council ready for serious communication or consultation, if you like, with the community. And I have been talking to Councillor Jones in relation to, you know, that process. It's as you can see there, it's set back in timeline to other projects, so we can't do everything at once. And the program for that is on track, and I can elaborate on that if necessary, but that's where that one sits. And really, we're probably looking forward to moving on that one. I really value that project because I think it's one that is going to be exciting to get going for the township of Banarkin, particularly in light of the signage issues down there and other things like that. So, and rectifying that toilet block too would be a great outcome. So yeah, we're looking forward to moving on that one.
Yeah, thank you for the update. I certainly agree. I think it's a really exciting project, so thank you.
Further speakers? Councillor Duff.
I just wanted to, I know that you've got here that councillors have been briefed on the scope of the Wandai public amenity refurbishments, but I just wondered if you could just refresh my memory on what we're actually doing there. And the second question was just when is the Apex Park car park path and paint happening? Because that's only 5% complete, and I know that's been on the books for quite some time.
Thank you, Councillor Duff, and through you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Duff, you were the only councillor who turned up at our briefing for the Wandai toilet amenities, and we appreciate your attendance. Yeah. And that's where that sits right now, because we lost our project manager, and we've progressed the project in that time, not as quickly as we'd like with staff issues, but we are about to go to tender for those upgrades, and they will be a fixed price contract for those three amenities. So we've got a new project manager lined up to run those projects, and the scope is exactly what was presented to you on the day. And again, that will be a good cleanup of those three toilet blocks. And second part of your question was to do with Apex Park. That's the car park construction. We've had our infrastructure design team designing that car park. We're waiting on those plans to hit the streets. We will make comment on those. In fact, it's really completed, that design. Once that design is completed and ticked off, we will just simply go to tender and get a local contractor to construct that car park, because our infrastructure team haven't got the capacity to do it in-house. And we will approach it that way. That's why it's been delayed, because the infrastructure team have been inundated in the design space. So we're just patiently waiting.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Manager. Yeah, thank you. Anything further, councillors? Manager, anything further?
Mr Mayor, could I just highlight a couple of things? I didn't get the chance to go through the report. May I do that?
My apologies. Yeah, please do. Thank you. Sorry.
No, that's okay. So just the only things I wanted to mention was the in the CapEx space, we have the rail trail, the Mergen Rail Trail. Now, that rail trail crossing was a Mergen project. I'm flagging to you that in the next quarterly review, I'd like to postpone that project and recommend that we use that $20,000 to meet the commitments on the rail trail immediate works. And that's no loss in terms of that rail trail crossing. I think we can live without that, but we can't live without getting that rail trail back going. So I'm just flagging that. I think the other things were answered in those other questions. So unless council has other questions, that was just the main thing I wanted to highlight there. And yeah, that's all, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Manager. And thanks for bringing that to our attention. Priorities have changed, and clearly, I'm just looking at the body language and the comments around the table. I think you'll have the support from council to redirect those funds into that rehab work on that Mergen to Gympie boundary section. It's been fairly well wiped out, I believe. Yeah, thank you. Okay, we'll go to the vote. Those in favour? Oh, hang on, Councillor Jones.
So your immediate repair works is from Mergen to Gympie and not the rail trail in between Kingaroy to Mergen?
That too.
Yeah, so there's two sections of work, Kingaroy to Mergen as well. Okay, thank you. Just thanks for clarifying that. Okay, we'll go to the vote. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. Next item is 9.3, the properties operational update at page 139. Welcome, Manager Leanne. Manager, would you please give us an overview of your report, if you could, please? Thank you.
Yep, certainly, councillors. Just wanted to run through and highlight a couple of little updates in the capital works program. Just with the floods and road closures, we have had some difficulty in just having some contractors take on supplies and finish the works as they originally had agreed to in their contract. So the South Burnett Aquatic Centre, we were scheduled to have that project completed last Friday, but unfortunately that didn't occur just with the flood damage and the contractors couldn't get here. It is on track though for completion of this Friday, so that they're working down there pretty quickly this week, and the cleaners will be in there on Friday. They'll have all of that nicely cleaned up and ready for opening on the Monday the 14th. So our opening date doesn't change. There's just not a lot of time for us just to finalise those little defects that we see. So if there are any things that come up on the Friday when we do our final inspection, what will happen is we'll just attend to them with the contractor after the pool's open, and we'll just schedule time to have those little minor things checked and fixed. But as we're progressing with that project, we're on site most days, and things have been addressed accordingly as the days go. The Wandai Showground's the same there. The contractor there hasn't been able to get back to site because of, once again, the floods. And yeah, so I just want to highlight that. There will be a delay in finalising that concrete work and the ramp there at the Wandai Pavilion. Kingaroy River Road CCT is commencing today, so that's going ahead. The Mergen shops, the repainting of the Mergen shops, we are actually painting the internal section of the Mergen shops back in the heritage colours of what the original shops were, because we have been able to identify that there's quite some nice windows and glazing on those windows once we removed some of the old paint and removed some of the temporary timber that was installed over the top of the windows. So at the same time, we're probably going to do part of the outside of the shop fronts as well with the heritage colours. What is that going to do? The only problem I can see doing that is that it's not going to really tie in with the rest of the actual hall. So yeah, it's just a tricky one. It's nice to return it to its heritage colours, but I think down the track in a capital works program, we would be looking at repainting the Mergen Town Hall, but there may be just a period there where we're not going to be able to, there's going to be two different colour schemes. But let's just have a look and see what it looks like. We'll do one part of it and just see how that works. the colour scheme that it returns back to are the pale pinks, the dusty pinks, the sandstone colour. So they're quite a pale colour. So it's not like it's going to be bright blue against the bright yellow that's there. So it will be quite a soft colour. So anyway, I just wanted to highlight the colour scheme and why we've chosen to go that way. We have been talking to Queensland Heritage just to get that feedback on those paint colours, because we had to take some paint samples, and as you can imagine, you've got to dig back through layers and layers of paint to actually find what those true colours were. But we've got that on record, and you know, over time you can see that the rest of the facility could actually be returned to its heritage colours. The only problem is, I suppose, some of that is difficult to achieve when you rent the space out to commercial operators and they have their commercial colours scheme. So you'd see something like the Heritage, the Commonwealth Bank. Well, they're not really going to be wanting to have our heritage colours. So we need to work in with the commercial operators going forward. But it's also us also participating in that facade program. So I can see this as an opportunity for us to be linking in with the facade program that you're going to be running under your Black Summer program. And so I see council also taking some leadership, and we've got that opportunity up at Mergen just to highlight that. So just wanted to highlight that. Mergen PCYC squash courts. So we've got some meetings scheduled coming up there where we'll be talking to the squash and the PCYC on the quotations that we have received for that work. The two tenders, we have had to provide an additional 1 week's extension to the Monjaw Hall and the Monjaw re-stumping and the re-roofing, just because the contractors have asked for an additional week. Because there is a contractor that couldn't get here because of the floods. So just wanted to highlight that. Yes. Facility maintenance. Our maintenance is going well. There's quite a list there. We just try to keep note of all the different jobs that's going on across the region. I would need to just check on the Mergen Showgrounds if those power poles did go in last week. Some of the works do get rescheduled because of the rain, and I'm sure everyone can appreciate that. Leasing is quite busy. There's a lot of groups trying to apply for grants, so it's a big mad rush. As Councillor Duff raised in her report, there are a lot of groups leaving everything to the last minute and requesting for letters of support and tenure, a proof of tenure. Right at the last minute, and some groups are finding out that they're occupying facilities of council without any lease, and we're working with those groups. So you'll see some of those leases come back through council for council to consider. There's reports on a few of the leasing matters coming forward in the rest of the meeting today. Well, that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Manager. Thank you for a very comprehensive report. Much appreciated. Okay, so we have the report presented for information. We have a mover, Councillor Henson, seconder, Councillor Shoemaker. Thank you. Okay, speakers, Councillor Duff.
Thank you for the update. Just on the Mergen Town Hall, when it was originally painted, well, the last time it was painted, I thought it was the heritage colours, and that's why that paint colour was chosen, because we got a lot of pushback. Not many people were happy with the colour. So I think they would be very pleased if it was actually changed, because there was not many people liked it, but just a bit confused about why those colours were chosen, because I thought they were the original colours, just that one. I just want to know why, just in the CCTV cameras, where we're at with Myers Road, because I think that's listed on the left-hand side, but it's not outlined into the detail on the right-hand column as what's happening with those cameras.
Well, I think, Councillor Duff, it's just summarised as Kingaroy Rail Trail.
Yep.
Leand in the right column. Would that refer to Myers Road?
Yeah,
okay.
And just another question is, what happened with the Mergen Show Society acquiring the buildings, that particular lease concern that they had? Has that been remedied?
Thank you. Yes, confirming the CCT cameras. All of those cameras will be installed in the month of March, so we've just got them scheduled over a period of time, and that does take into consideration Mears Road, so that's correct. The Mergen lease arrangements with the Mergen Showgrounds, we haven't progressed that any further to date. We've really been focusing on sorting out the insurance matters that we've had there with the storm damage, and really getting those buildings checked and rewired and the actual power poles installed. So it is a project that we need to pick back up and progress with that, which I think we're probably in a position to do that now once these items are fixed, and yeah, we've probably got a few projects going on in Mergen in that entire facility, because we've had to actually work through and identify a whole heap of fire hydrant issues and water pressure issues in the PCYC, which has affected the showground and the sports ground. So there's been a number of projects that we're probably attending to, but very happy to pick up the lease discussions around the buildings going forward.
Thank you, Manager. Councillor Duff.
Thank you. Just one more. Just wanted to flag that yesterday in the recovery meeting, it was highlighted that there's an opportunity for sporting clubs to apply for up to $20,000. I'm just wanting to make sure that we've flagged that, particularly with the Wandai Sports Association, because I'm pretty sure that there's plenty of things that they need to upgrade. So just and maybe all of our sporting groups, if we could get that message out there about that $20,000 opportunity.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Yeah, and non-profit organisations, as they call them, just looking at here, can get up to $50,000. So to cover clean-up costs, remove debris, repair or replace damaged infrastructure. Leanne, so that might be just worth following up as well. So there's a not-for-profit category, and there's also for $50,000, and a sporting groups for $20,000.
Certainly, I think there are a lot of groups. I think you find there's a lot of groups just trying to do it as volunteers, but they need assistance with some of the material costs. Wandai Lions is an example, Wandai Wolves, Wandai Cricket. There's a few of them that have had fence damage, building damage. We're yet to get down to Blackbutt Pony Club and Blackbutt Lions down there. So yeah, that will be very handy. So we can communicate that through to some of the groups that we're working with.
Thank you, Manager. That'd be great. Okay, Councillor Jones.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Just down the bottom there under the leasing, it just says support has been provided. So that's just helping people through the process of filling out their leasing documents or whatever. There's nothing financial there. And the Blackbutt SES office roof, just want to try and, for my own benefit, the SES, so all the SES offices and I guess complexes are council-owned facilities that they lease office across the whole region? Or what's the breakup there?
I'm not 100% sure if we own them or we do own some of them.
Yeah, just I'd just note there that we're doing a consultant has been engaged to prepare plans to allow quotes to be obtained to repairs, prevent further water leakage, all that sort of stuff. So obviously it's an essential part of our community and all that sort of stuff, and happy to support it. But I just, I guess in my view, just in my point of view, every time we mention SES, there is financial implications on the council and the amount that we support them and all that sort of stuff. And I'm not saying that we don't do it or whatever. I understand that it's an essential service, but I'd like to get an indication just of the real implications on that sort of stuff and how much we do support the SES in regards to that. And do we claim any money through our rates or anything, Mr. CEO, in regards to supporting that, like the fire levy and that sort of stuff that's passed on? Or is that just completely up to the ratepayer base or whatever we get the money for to support that?
Forgot the button. Yeah, just out of the budget to the best of my knowledge, but we'll note it, Mayor, if we note it as a question on notice and bring it back next month. Yep.
It's a really good question for the Budget Committee meeting when we get to that section as well, to have that level of detail on that SES commitment. Yeah, thanks, Councillor Jones. Good question. Okay, thank you, Manager. Anything further? No? If not, we'll go to the vote. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. 9.4, future use of 32 Walter Road, Kingaroy, at page 146. Back to you. Thank you, Manager.
Councillor, so just to talk through this report, back before Christmas we actually had a site meeting on Walter Road. So this is the park down beside Bunnings and the pet shop. So we were able to work through a lovely sunny morning talking to local residents about the use of the park. We did have a survey where we actually asked similar questions to all the people that walk through. So 7 local residents living in close proximity took part in the actual survey on the day, and another 2 interested citizens participated and submitted forms at a later date. So that information is there in the report. It talks about how often the people have used the park. Interesting, out of the 9 residents, 6 people do not use the park. So, you know, we're really only, I know we've only got a very small survey, but that's all that participated in the day. So just to give you an understanding and what they use the park for. So there's some notes there on, in terms of just for recreation purposes, feeding the birds and enjoying the nice greenery and the trees and the quiet space. So going forward for council, it's a consideration. Council will need to think about whether or not you'd like to progress with the divestment of this reserve. It is not freehold land, it is a reserve. If council wishes to progress, we would carry out investigations with the department and look at what sort of costs are involved in acquiring the piece of land from the state and then selling the parcel of land on, if that's what you wish to do.
Yeah, thank you very much, Manager. I think we'll have a discussion around this one before we go any further. Some feedback, guidance. What are your thoughts, councillors? Councillor Potter, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Look, along with the other councillors that attended, Councillor Jones and Councillor Shoemaker, along with the CEO and Manager Leanne, and I think Rebecca as well. So, you know, considering the amount of houses that live up and around behind there, that's actually quite a lot of people that turned up, I thought. It was a Saturday morning, but we did have it out. We did put the notice out there. And the amount of people that we spoke to that thought actually sort of didn't even use it because they thought it was private land as well anyway. So, look, I personally believe that we should be looking at, you know, maybe seeing if we can sell this off, but I wouldn't like to just sell it off to the first buyer. I think we've got to look at what actually goes there. But you've also got those issues with drainage. So once we looked at through infrastructure with those drainage issues that were brought up a couple of times during that Saturday morning, I think we should go from there.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Shoemaker.
Yes, certainly. Did appreciate the opportunity and thank the staff for coming out on their Saturday morning to talk with residents. Being in the park for that space of time actually was really important for me because I saw the increase in traffic coming through that area and just how hard it is, even if you were to pull up and try to use the park facility, it's almost impossible with the traffic movements in that area at this moment. When we talk about access, there's actually no way to pull off and park and use that area. Reading through the feedback, really do appreciate the report. It was good to read, you know, that people don't mind the site for the small birds and the birds they see in the area. And of course, there are some smaller trees and things in the area that would encourage them in. And I know during the discussions we had, we did talk about the potential trade-off. And I know we have talked about the Walter Road area, the section that leads up through the centre of town that's got the rail reserve on it and the challenges in terms of, you know, built infrastructure, but the opportunity to create an entrance way into town, some sort of parkland. And I know every single day I see a number of people using that footpath facility. So there were discussions about potentially more chairs and along the way, improving some of the trees and plantings and things. So as a trade-off, if we weren't to keep this park, I can see opportunities to improve that area of certainly utilised land opposite, certainly on the table. I just wanted to ask in terms of the process going forward. So it was my understanding really that the costs are in terms of applying to the department to change the freehold. And I was just keen to understand the process. So if we support this motion, the next steps look like or would be what?
Through you, Mr Mayor. Yes, certainly. So what we would do is we would go back to the state now and explain, State Department, and explain to them that we have carried out some community consultation and we share openly the feedback with them. And then what we would do is ask the department what are the next steps for consideration, what sort of price or value that they would be putting on this parcel of land for council to consider. Because, you know, we don't want to make an application straight away and say, yes, we want to purchase this property, not knowing what the cost is, because you may actually decide that the cost is not reasonable and prohibitive to move forward. So we want to do that. We'll also want to talk to the department around an entry point into that parcel of land. So are there going to be restrictions put on this piece for access? Because we are mindful of that it is on the main road. You know, what implication does it have on the turning lane, the bike lane that you have there as well? So we'll be keen to talk to DTMR just to see what sort of impacts that's going to have now on this parcel of land if we were to decide to purchase it, but more so if the future owner was going to want access off the highway, yes, to develop it. So they're the sorts of questions, if you're willing to continue on, now that you've got the community feedback, we would ask those questions and bring a further report back with more information for council consideration.
Yes, thank you for that additional context. I'm certainly supportive of moving forward with this one, I think. Seeing what feedback comes back from the department, both and also the main roads implications as well. I think it's a problem for council regardless of whether we divest of the property or not. At the moment, there's no ability to actually pull up and use the facilities. You have to park either at Bunnings or Petstock or around the corner. So, yeah, thank you for the work that's been done. I'm supportive of the recommendation.
Thank you, Manager. Manager, just at the so a couple of things there. I might look to actually just flesh out a bit more detail into the recommendation, if that's okay, shortly. But before doing that, the drainage issues. It's currently zoned low density residential. In considering this, will council be looking at options in terms of whether we look to divest of it as a residential allotment, or that may not be appropriate with the drainage, I'm not sure, or are we going to sort of get some advice that it really should be rezoned as for commercial purposes? We just would like some advice around where we're going with that. Thank you.
Yeah, I would suggest that it's something that we need to investigate once we understand the access. Yeah, I assume you want to be looking for a return. You would want to be looking at something around a commercial rezone for commercial purposes, but we probably just need to look at the cost involved in that, how that, yeah, whether we're going to get a return for that. Happy to be guided by others, but I think that's in the next report we bring back to council for consideration of what those options are.
Thank you, Manager. Just a further question. What sort of time frame, might be a hard one to answer, dealing with the Queensland government, what sort of time frame do you think we'd be looking at before we could come back with information about the cost, access and drainage issues realistically, when will we be seeing this come
Realistically,
back?
I would say 6 to 8 weeks. Really a 2 month period is we need to give that back to the department and give ourselves time to analyse the information that they provide to us and whether that triggers a further conversation then back to DTMR. So there could be a little bit of going backwards and forwards. So then, maybe we're suggesting it is March now, back to the standing committee in June.
Yeah, thank you very much. If I can, just put forward a motion then, Bree, if we just go down where it says on the second line, particularly to seek advice on the costs associated with divestment, STMENT, yep, comma, rezoning, rezoning issues, comma, access and drainage issues as retained, and then after the word consultation at the end there, Bree, if we could just take the full stop, and a report be brought to the July Communities Standing Committee meeting. Yeah, that's perfect. And just drop an R in the word brought there. Thanks, Bree. Yep, that's just autocorrect. Thank you very much. Manager, are you happy with that? Any issues with that proposed motion? I'm just conscious of the fact that we're going to be heads in their budget up until the end of June. So maybe July, August, if you're comfortable with that. Yeah. So I'd like to move that. Is anyone prepared to second that? Councillor Jones, thank you. Speakers on the motion. Oh, okay. Continue the word to, replace. Thank you, Councillor Duff. Okay, if there's no speakers, we'll go to the vote. Those in favour? Yep. Carried unanimously. Thank you all. Thank you, Manager. Okay, we're now up to Committee 9.5, consider increased support to Boondooma Homestead Caretaker. That's at page 150. Through you, General Manager, to Manager Leanne. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, just to provide an update on the Boondooma Homestead, there is quite a detailed letter attached to the report from the Boondooma Homestead, or Boondooma Museum and Heritage Association, the committee. But in summary, the committee, we're working with the committee. I mean, Councillor Henshin and Councillor Duff and myself attend their meetings regularly, which I think they're generally monthly. Just some feedback. I mean, the committee is very concerned about their future going forward, the number of volunteers, and I think the impact of what COVID is having on their events over the last 2 years is having significant financial impact on the committee as well. And also, I mean, they're concerned a lot of their volunteers at this stage are aged volunteers, and they're probably struggling to look at where they're going in the future in terms of recruiting new volunteers and recruiting new members on their management committee. So I just wanted to highlight that for council, because we're trying to provide them with a fair bit of support and guidance through their management meetings on taking small steps at a time to try to achieve the things they need to achieve. They have got some big projects that they have taken on, and they do host two quite major events that does take a lot of manpower and a lot of support from the wider community. So in this letter to council, they have highlighted their concerns they've got in regards to recruiting of a new caretaker, their caretaker relief and the allowance that they provide to a caretaker. We've talked to them about maybe looking at some short-term closures of the facility to give their caretakers a break. The caretakers that they currently have are 24/7. So they're on call, they're there every day. And then what they try to do is bring in relief. So if one of their caretakers does need to go to town for whatever purposes, they try to bring in relief. So there's always someone there at that facility. And yeah, you can see the burden that it has on a caretaker providing that level of support all year round, 365 days of the year. So we've sort of suggested that maybe they need to look at some short-term closures. There might be some certain weekends or periods of time where it's quiet, and they may need to close their gates to give themselves a bit of a break. But that's no short-term fix to their long-term problem. They've also got a lot of maintenance. As you can appreciate, there's a large amount of buildings out there. There's a large amount of lawn and gardens that they take care of. There's a very big caravan park area that is mowed like probably just as good as our lawns in our own home. So they do take a lot of care and a lot of pride looking after the facility. So they've really upped the ante on the level of maintenance that they're doing out there, which is also impacting on the caretakers, because you can see that they're actually working extremely long hours to keep it to that standard. And by the group increasing the number of facilities out there, the accommodation facilities, you can see that needs management, and therefore that's taking time as well. So the committee have presented a letter here today for council to consider about maybe contributing an additional amount of money towards the caretaker allowance. You can see there that they are asking for an additional $5,720. So there is a total cost then to council that you would need to see in our operational budgets would go up to $12,220 per annum that we would be contributing then to the caretaker's annual allowance, as well as council contributing. You contribute in many other ways to Binduma Homestead with electricity costs, looking after the existing lawnmowers out there, servicing them, and any other assistance that we can provide. From a property point of view and property maintenance, we do a lot of maintenance on the buildings, like the caretaker's building and some of the other buildings as well. So the cabins, the big top. So all those buildings out there require maintenance as well. So I just wanted to highlight that that's the request from the committee for an additional contribution, and also in their letter they have asked council to consider when you're doing your budgets for looking at replacement of mowers. Binduma Homestead certainly would like to receive a second-hand mower if that was possible. So I'm happy for Susan to talk to that.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I received correspondence from Manager Leanne from the volunteers requesting that council does provide them with one of our surplus to needs or lawnmowers that we'll be replacing in our plant replacement program, and we're more than happy to oblige with that, to donate that. But I do understand that they have also requested that we maintain the item of plant, and I just, without going and fully investigating it at the moment, it's totally without beyond our bounds to be doing that, especially with our priorities with keeping our money-making plant, and where my mechanics are really under the pump right now. And with the plant and fleet review, we are looking at other options where we're considering contracting small items of plant out to a local business to service and that. So unfortunately at this point in time I can't concede to that request, but most definitely we're more than happy to donate a lawnmower, and they're normally in very good condition too. So
Yeah, thank you, Manager. It seems like a good community thing to do, to donate the lawnmower to these sorts of groups, but I'd have concerns about council being responsible for the ongoing maintenance. I think we'd have to come with a condition that the groups that receive these things are up for the insurance, the maintenance, the costs, all costs associated with, I would have thought, with the ongoing maintenance of them. Otherwise we set a terrible precedent, don't we? Yeah. Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Can we take out that last part then? Council services the mower, please.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, the only reason that we've actually put it in there is because we currently service one of the other mowers. So I'm just worried it's going to be an interesting conversation for us to have, that we're going to continue to service one mower and not another mower.
Okay, so well, hang on, Councillor Jones, sorry, we'll put your light on so we can hear that. Thank you, if you could. Thank you.
Where's the other mower that we service currently?
At Binduma Homestead. So they have a mower. There's two mowers out there, one that we service, and it's a more recent one that we must have donated in the last couple of years. And then they have a very, very old mower that, once again, we must have donated that many years ago, but it's on its last legs. So it's going. It's unsafe to continue with. So they really need a replacement mower. So the mower that is currently there is a mower that council donated, and we service it once a year, I think it is, and we replace the blades once a year on that mower. So it could be that we could govern it that way, that it's just once a year it gets serviced. I'm not sure how often some of these mowers, though, these newer mowers, how often they need to be serviced. But yeah, I'm just highlighting that we already currently service the other mower.
Yeah, look, we're going to have these requests from other groups, so just looking forward into the future, and I've actually got a motion. I'll put a notice of motion up that we donate the 6 old replacement mowers. So I think in that context, we've got to be careful here about being consistent and fair if we're going to be servicing mowers once they've been donated, if we do elect to do so into the future. So, Councillor Henson, what are your thoughts?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I touched on this the other day in Chambers. It's great to support them, and I'm fully supportive of the financial assistance in relation to their caretakers there, because it is 24/7. It's a massive job that they do there. They mow an enormous amount of area there, and my concern with giving end-of-life mowers to associations is their end of life. So we give them to an association knowing full well that they're going to require considerable maintenance when we're getting rid of them because they're end of life, and donating them to community organisations and then expected to maintain them. I'm not just sure, and most of these community organisations have the ability to get grants to be able to go and purchase mowers. I mean, many do, and I would suggest that perhaps, if the availability was there, they'd be much better off buying a new mower rather than be hand-me-downs that are going to continue to cost money. And I mean, across the board, and I know your motion, Mr. Mayor, in relation to community groups with mowers that we have end of life to give them. Are we giving them a headache, and are we creating another headache for those communities as well? I mean, I'm fully supportive to try and support them in some shape or form, but I don't know, giving them end-of-life equipment that's going to cost our department, and here we are trying to save a few dollars, that we're going to be maintaining. And yes, we do maintain the one that's out there. Its life expectancy would be limited as well. They have an old tractor and a slasher out there that I'm not sure whether it come off the ark or something, but and that's great. They've made do with that, and the committee is a mature committee there, but it is a massive job out there on that facility. And I do encourage, just while I'm on it, that and thank you to Councillor Shoemaker. She's put her hand up for a particular date on Spirits in the Bush to come and help volunteer, perhaps. And I'd encourage you other councillors to perhaps consider their diaries to be able to do the same, because it is a council facility that committee out there has been, and Judy Brand and Bruce Metrol have really kept that place together. And I mean, like I said, it's a maturing committee out there, and a wonderful facility on our northern boundaries out there. But it's a very, 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 very curly one, and an expensive one. If we're giving hand-me-downs, it's just going to be that. Hand-me-downs and going to cost us a lot of money. But as far as the remuneration for the increase, I'm fully supportive of that. The second-hand mower one, I guess it depends on what is in our fleet of mowers as to what that might be available as to their area. I mean, there's not much point us giving them a mower that will not suffice their needs out there. That'd want to be a reasonably substantial mower, because I think they would mow, dare I say, I'd throw a figure 5 to 6 hectares out there. It's massive. It is massive out there, maybe more. And they do a wonderful job of that too. Yeah. So, but I do encourage people to love to see fellow councillors out there, if not at a meeting one day, certainly to the Spirit of the Bush.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Shoemaker.
Yes, looking forward to it, but certainly not into that stuff called haggis, so you can't count on me for that. I just have a couple of questions in relation to the report, thank you, and want to acknowledge the work that's gone into that draft conservation management plan, which I know has been quite a large project, and a project that's been done in partnership with the committee, and I haven't finished reading all 187 pages, but there is a hell of a lot of information there. So it does set us up with some good information for the future. So thank you for the work that's happened with that. I did want to understand, based on the conversation we had around that draft conservation management plan, I am worried a little bit about some of the requirements that we might have as a result of that plan and our ability to work with that committee to deliver on some of those things. So just wanted a bit of a heads up after that briefing what the next stage steps are, because I know there was a discussion about perhaps a master plan and I did have to duck out. So just would like to understand that. I also would like to understand a little bit more, and my apologies, around the ownership structure. So we own the facility, the committee lease it, yes, from us. And then as part of that lease arrangement, they maintain the facility. Is there an opportunity to, like, I don't know when that lease is up or the provisions of that lease, but I personally would like to have a review of it and just see some of these things like the management of the facility. I put it right up there with Ringsfield. Like it's a incredible facility that our community value, and having these conversations about the conservation management plan, having the conversations about the caretakers, I guess I'm just thinking about that. And the concerns they've raised, I've read the letter, the concerns they've raised about their sustainability as a group. Like I would hate to see this fall over. So what I would welcome an opportunity to get around the table, have a look at that lease arrangement and see what conditions we're putting on this group, and see, I know budgets are hard and tight, but see if there's any opportunity there to talk about some of these things and share some of the burden of maintaining it. And my last question was just in relation to the camping revenue or the caravanning revenue, and you know, what the opportunities are there, because I certainly recognise on the back of COVID the number of people flowing through our region for camping and caravanning, so just trying to understand how many people are actually staying and where that revenue is going, and yeah, there's some of my questions, Manager Leanne.
Thank you, Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's a lot of questions, and yes, there's lots of work to be done in this space. Yes, the facility is a council-owned facility. We own it in freehold. The management model that we have there is a lease arrangement to the committee. The lease is very light on in terms of all of the maintenance and the responsibilities. We've got to remember probably 4 or 5 years ago, this committee didn't have a lease. The facility was never leased to anyone, and this committee was a management committee, and it's formally from the Wandai Shire Council days, and they continue just to operate and look after the facility in the best interest of the entire community. So we worked with the committee and got it over the line where they would take on a lease, and that did take some time for them. They were very nervous in signing a lease arrangement, so that we really needed to be careful not to actually nail them down and that they're responsible for every single thing out there. And very much so. I mean, it is a heritage precinct, and there's a number of heritage buildings out there that do need to be restored and preserved and looked after, and there's requirements there. So council has a responsibility for that, and we share that responsibility through this lease arrangement with the management committee. So the lease is certainly in place to protect them and also to protect ourselves, and to give some sort of governance arrangement where probably before it was quite loose and things could just happen, and council had no control over who was approving some of those improvements or where some of those activities were going. So you've now got a structure where you've got that in place and you can contribute to that. And equally for them, they can clearly see what they're responsible for, and they've been able to use that tenure arrangement to seek funding opportunities. And that's one thing that Bunduma Homestead Committee do well. Judy would have 3 or 4 grants on the go all the time. So we certainly take our hat off to her for that, because if it's not in the tourism, it's in the marketing and promotion area, and then it's in preservation of the buildings, and a huge undertaking is the conservation management plan. Is it something that they're extremely passionate about? They're passionate about the outcome, which is preserving the heritage, but they're equally quite concerned around the conservation management plan, and they're quite concerned about the tourism side of things as well, just where that's heading, and making sure that they're seen to, and other people through this region and other regions support them in major tourism events. So there's a lot going on in this space, and I'm not an expert across all of those areas. I can really just continue to support them and help them in the conservation of the heritage listed buildings. But we've through Councillor Duff and Councillor Henshaw, we've talked about that the group, they do need some assistance in their management model and having a good look at where they're going in the future and where are there opportunities for them to actually change their direction. It would be nice to analyse their budget and their revenue streams a little bit more, because there's probably some opportunities. I couldn't tell you how much they charge per fee for staying in the cabin, to camping, to accessing power and all those things, but who's there to give them guidance on their revenue raising opportunities, and same with all of their marketing promotion. A lot of their items in their shop there are quite aged, so they have all these wonderful events, but what's on the shelf to really sell and create revenue for them? So they do need a lot of assistance in that space, and they're asking for it, but we're just not resourced to provide that to that level for them. The committee at the moment have decided to invest $10,000 in marketing and promotion of their events in their facility themselves, and they've hired a local marketing officer to really get that packaged up. So you'll be seeing lots of stuff over the Facebook page and social media about these future events and the facility itself. My concern a little bit is that we're promoting this massive facility, so the expectation is we're keeping it at this really high level, and there's limited funds in the bucket to keep it going. So so I think you're right. We probably do need to sit around the table a little bit more with the management committee and specifically talk about management models, revenue models going forward, and where are they heading and where we can give them assistance in this space.
Yeah, thank you for the responses. The reasons for my questions is I kind of recognise we've got such a passionate, hardworking group of people that are doing wonderful work, and if there is an opportunity for us to support some of the work that happens through our visitor information centres with marketing, Sam and the crew are absolute whizzes. Like, whether there's an opportunity to make some of those connections, I don't know. But I just think it would be timely to maybe have a look at some of these things and have that bigger picture conversations, because personally I'd hate to lose them, and I know they are losing some valued members. So I'm fully supportive of the increase in caretaker allowance. I think that's more than you know, honestly, I think we're getting an incredible deal for the amount of work that's been done there. But yeah, my thinking is I'd love to have a bigger picture look and see if we can support and I recognise the work you've all done, certainly Councillor Duff and Henshin, Manager Leanne, with the resources you've got.
Councillor Jones.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Seem to be getting bogged down on this one. Can we just move with the increase? I think we're all fully supportive of the extra money, and with the concerns raised around the motor, can we just ask for a conditional report be brought back on all the mowers to make sure that they're at a standard or reasonable standard, whatever the standards and condition of the mowers are. And if we give them to the community, just say that there's no guarantee that we'll replace the mower if it does happen to blow up. Something along that.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Jones. Yeah, we need to get this one wrapped up. I've got a notice of motion coming forward to the next committee meeting for exec finance, and that we do donate these 6 mowers to different groups or expressions of interest. But I think that's a great idea. Before we do that, we need to see a condition report from the guys in the workshop as to the expected future life, because they might be at end of life from council's perspective, but for a small community group just tinkering around doing small areas, they might not be. I know that those second-hand mowers are probably going to be bought by contractors who would then go and use them as contractors, probably doing at least 15 acres a year or more. So, but I would be certainly suggesting that we need to be clear about who's going to be responsible for it moving forward. So, yeah, can we get that? Councillor Jones is going to put that up. So we leave item 1 there, Councillor Jones. Are you happy if we take item 2 out?
Yeah.
And that'll just get picked up in next week's meeting?
Yeah, and just a question on notice to GM Jarvis about getting a condition report on the mowers for on, you know, the ones that we're planning on removing or something.
Yeah,
But
so if we
just-
take 2 out, and then GM Jarvis, with that next week's meeting, can we have a condition report come with that notice of motion? Is that possible in time for next Wednesday?
Yes, sorry, through you, Mr Mayor. I'm just thinking, my fleet supervisor is off on a month's sick leave, and my scheduler, who is acting, will be away as well, and we're just in the middle of budget. So,
Well, I'm happy to push that notice of motion back to April.
if you don't
Give you an
mind,
extra
please,
month, do a
because I've got
proper
no
assessment of all the mowers.
Yeah, I've got
Let's
no
look at where
staff.
they're at. Some might need to go to scrap, some might be good for another 10 years. Can we push that back? I'll push my notice of motion back
Thank
another
you.
month to give you time.
Appreciate
Happy
that.
with
Thank
that?
you.
Yeah, okay. That's
just getting
fine.
a conditional report so that when that comes up, we know for sure and certain. And I think when we give it to the community organisations, we need to just make it quite upfront, say, if you take the mower, it blows up tomorrow, we're not doing anything else. That's the risk you take with the second-hand mower.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Jones. So Councillor Jones has put that motion forward. We take item 2 out, just deal with the budget for the caretaker at the moment. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Duff, thank you. Further speakers?
I just want.
Councillor Duff?
Sorry, just a question. Just wanted to make sure that the reason why we were donating that mower is the mower that they've currently got in. Like, are they okay to mow now, or are they desperately needing a mower?
They've got one mower that they are utilising. The other mower, I think my understanding is becoming unsafe, and it's getting to a point where it's non-repairable. My understanding, they got a quote, and or they were trying to get a quote to repair it, and I think the company said there's no parts to repair it. So that's the issue they have, I think. So they'll be back down to one mower.
Just on that, Councillor Duff, too, we're getting rid of 6 mowers, and the new ones haven't arrived yet anyway. I don't believe GM Jarvis have they. So we wouldn't be in a position to give them a mower within the next month probably anyway, would we, General Manager? No.
No, through you, Mr Mayor, no, not at all. And as for donating, it's of zero value when we do, because we write it down as a negative, write the asset off as of no value, so therefore we're complying again with the Act, so that's quite legal. But no, we haven't. I think only one turned up the other day that we've had on back order for about 10 months or something. So, yeah, we've had a lot of difficulty getting plant.
Thank you, General Manager. Yeah, thank you, Manager. Okay, we'll go to the vote then. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. 9.6, Tingura Carriage Club surrender of permit is at 1:55. We'll come back to you. Thank you. Thank you, Manager.
Just quickly, this is just a report for information. The Tingura Carriage Club did enter into a trustee permit with council. They have decided that they would like to surrender that permit back to council, and they've provided some reasons there for council's just understanding. There is still a high use of this area for public camping, and they're quite concerned about how they manage that and also manage the liability risk when they're trying to hold events on that site when they've also got campers there. So it's probably just a little bit difficult to work through. They probably felt that the community didn't really support that sort of usage over that facility as well. So that's just something, I think in the past we have been careful with this. I mean, that's why we do try to go out for community consultation. And I think in this one we probably didn't open it up that far afield and ask for community feedback on something like that before we actually went down this track. So, it's just a good reminder to us that we probably just need to continue to allow the community to provide feedback on these public use areas for council's consideration before we make that decision. So that's good feedback and improvement for us. And they're happy. So just remember that they have got an additional area up behind the school and going to the west of the tennis courts in the school. So they're going to continue to occupy and use that area. So it's not that they're leaving Tingura, they're just not occupying the two spaces.
Thank you, Manager. Okay, we've got the recommendation of the report we received. We have a mover, Councillor Potter, seconded Councillor Henson. Speakers, any questions? No? Everyone's comfortable? Okay, we'll go to the vote. Those in favour, carried unanimously. 9.7, update on the progress for the divestment of 1 Pound Street, Kingaroy at 156. We're still with you. Thank you, Manager.
Okay, councillors, just to, this was a request that you made, I think at the last meeting. You'd like us to bring back a report on our progress and our recommendation on moving forward. It's just an update for council to receive at this stage. We're keen to get the quotation out, it is out, for a consultant to undertake the master plan, and we appreciate and take on the feedback that you provided to us at a previous meeting, that you're really keen to make sure that what those requirements are that the consultant's going to be undertaking will sign off on that before we engage them. So that just wanted to let you know that that's progressing, and we hope that we receive some really good tenders back, and that closes on the 17th of March to progress that.
Thank you, Manager. Manager, just we'll have a discussion about this, I think, before we pass it through. What sort of time frame do you think we're looking at? We've got to obviously engage once we assess the tender, give them time to do their detailed planning. In your mind, time frames that we'll look at before we see that report come back?
I think you'll be able to engage pretty much straight away from the responses that we receive. It's not like, you should get some really good quotations or tenders back, and you should be able to appoint someone straight away. So that could come back in the next meeting. I can't see why that wouldn't happen. What we probably need to have a look at is the time frame and how much work we're going to want the consultant to do in the space of community consultation. I am aware that there are some business owners out there that are keen to have input into this master plan. So the consultant will need to make sure that the consultant has got some targets on there where they are meeting some key stakeholders and business people to prepare their master plan. So we'll just need to work through that. It could be at least 3 months before we see something back on the master plan.
I'm just wondering if we could I'd just like to pin down some sort of target date so in our mind we know. Would August, if we looked at August, September, you're thinking 4 or 5 months, be possibly achievable? September? 5 months? And look, we can always extend 5 months because there's a lot of community consultation to happen around this, isn't there?
I think so.
Yeah, so...
Because really there's 2 lots of consultation, isn't there? There's the first one where you get people's input, and then once you've got a draft concept plan with a couple of options, you want to take that back out. So there's 2 lots of consultation that happens with something like this. So I think that is a good time frame, September.
September. Thank you, Manager. Okay, we'll keep going around the table. Other comments, observations, councillors? I probably just, I'm looking at the land use assessment provided to us by AEC, and I'm really pleased with what they've come up with there, Manager. Thank you. From my point of view as one councillor, looking at page, I can't see this, but I think it's, yeah, they talk about their recommendations page. They've got a map of the site at the bottom. It's page 2, 3, 4, or something like that. Anyway, they've recommended, the recommended option will accommodate a variety of uses on the site, including retirement village and or aged care facility, community facility, an option for a community facility perhaps, a potential highway-oriented retail use, and open space, a buffer between to the northern side. And of course, we have that parkland area there where the community gardens are, etc., which Manager, I suppose, could be part or could constitute that buffer. So look, for me, I really like the retirement village, the over 60s village concept in a safe space. And with the option with that land that we've got, that is right up against Kingaroy Street on the southern side of the service station, those other buildings, to extend that commercial precinct along there. So I think they're really sound recommendations and would look forward to seeing that report come back. The other thing is that the divestment options, they've recommended that we look at, out of 4 options, 2 or 3, and 2 was to sell with a master plan approval in place, or 3, sell with a master plan approval in place as a structured transaction whereby the sale price could be reduced in exchange for community facility benefits being delivered, which was 2 and 3, they were their recommendations. So I think the recommendation we've got here goes to what that assessment says, that we should really develop a master plan, and then we should go out to the market with a master plan approval in place. So I think that this recommendation really does is underpinned by that original land use assessment, which found that would be the most effective way to market the asset. Did anyone else want to add to that before we go further? Thank you, Councillor Shoemaker.
Yeah, absolutely agree, and I've certainly enjoyed the workshops and the many conversations we've had about this since coming to council, and it's great to get an update on the progress that we've come this far now, and that there is an offer out there for people to consider. I really just also reading over the offer documents, I think they have really encapsulated what we've discussed, and I am really impressed by the information on page 171 of the agenda that talks about that targeted stakeholder engagement and really lays the foundation in terms of our expectations around taking this to our community and having that conversation, being that it is the last enormous piece of land on the edge of Kingaroy, what the opportunities are there. So I really do look forward to those conversations. I've had nothing but positive feedback though from the community and the business community that I've talked to about our process so far. So thank you for the work that you've done and for taking this forward. I'm really looking forward to the master plan and what comes back.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Jones.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just a question. So the work that we're doing, and I can't disagree with any of the comments, it's an exceptional report, but just for clarification, if somebody comes along from nowhere and goes, here's $10 million, does that take that application or that proposal off the table, or are we ruling that out, or what? Or with all this sort of stuff that we're doing, is this going to still be open for somebody, a big investor, to come along and just go, whack, here's $5 million? Is that taking that option off the table with this report?
General Manager O'May, from a planning point of view, if we had a master plan approved through our planning department that we could market the asset for, and someone comes along and trumps that with a whole different concept that meets DA requirements, and we were happy to sell it, or they just want to buy it and then take their risks on a DA, What are you thinking? I can see you're thinking away there.
Oh no, through you. I've got
It's a good question. It's a good
the
question.
short answer from me is sold. 10 million, thank you, sold. But you know, because this property has already been tendered, we've satisfied our legislative requirements for disposal of the land. So if there was an offer on the table, council would be able to consider that legally under the Local Government Act and act on that as it saw fit. So yeah, it doesn't necessarily rule out if someone did come forward. What we're doing through this process is trying to maximise that return. But yeah, if there was something up that, it wouldn't preclude council sort of looking at a different option or accepting that.
So, General Manager, what you're saying is that we could go through this process, do all the consultation, develop a master plan, look to sell it with a master plan approval in place, or market it with a master plan approval attached to it, and then if after having done that, someone comes along and says, "Here's a cheque for $10 million. We'll buy it off you." We're still able to do that, is what you're saying. We're not prohibited from doing so. Okay. It's obviously the council's got to consider whether or not they want to in light of all the community's expectations. But yeah, Councillor Shoemaker, thank you.
Yeah, and I think I just would like to clarify, but if I remember correctly, that's kind of where we started. Like, we received an offer for a piece of this land, and whilst the offer was a very good offer, it was hard to actually make that. I found it personally hard to make that decision, because what did that mean for the remainder of the parcel of land? So I just want to clarify that we're on the same page here, that we are looking at that opportunity in its entirety in a way that means that, yes, we can market it, but also achieve the outcomes that our community would like to see, being that it is the last big piece of land. So, and I understand former councils had made decisions not to accept offers, significant offers for the parcel of land, because they didn't necessarily agree with the outcome that was going to be produced. Am I right in my understanding of that?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so I was really just talking through the legislative. We've satisfied our legislative requirements, so we could sell it. So if council's decision, we were better to have money in the bank and not the block of land tomorrow, then that option is on the table. So whether that's the right decision, that's what council will decide at the time. So just saying, it doesn't preclude those other options going down there. So as I said, all we're trying to do is maximise the return, because at the time, council considered not accepting the offer and trying to retain the land and do something else was the best option at the time. So yeah.
Thank you, General Manager May. And I guess in some ways what you're saying is council has the option then to consider the financial and social issues associated with selling that and the community expectations around that, even after we do this process. So that's good. It keeps our options open. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks everyone. That's been a good discussion. Okay, so if I could just maybe change that recommendation a little bit, that the Community Standing Committee notes this report for information and also notes the intention to provide a future report to the September Community Standing Committee meeting. Not to hold you to that, Manager, but it just gives council, we get that on the books. We've got a bit of understanding as the time frame that we're looking at about 5 to 6 months before we'll see that come back with the process that has to be undertaken. So I'd like to move that. Do we have a seconder? Yep, Councillor Potter, thank you. Any speakers to that? No? Go to the vote. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. The next item is 9.8, update to council on tree removal at Ringsfield House, which is at page 177. Is this yours, Manager? Again, thank you.
Yep. So, councillors, just a short report on the tree removal at Ringsfield House. In the report, I did note that this tree was included in the original garden plans. I just wanted to highlight that is actually incorrect. If you look at the attachment, you'll see a very old historical garden plan, and the tree that's located behind the hedge is not included in the garden plans that they've prepared many years ago. So But look, we just wanted to bring this to council's attention because it is such a significant area around the actual house, and the gardens. You know, they are a beautiful feature of this complex. And unfortunately, our recommendation that this tree does need to be removed to protect the building in the future. It has got a lot of rot and insect activity occurring in some of those weak spots as a result of the large branch falling in that last storm and coming down on the actual house itself. So what my suggestion would be is that we would remove the tree, and once we got that Ringsfield House Management Committee up and going, there certainly would be opportunity to consult with a group of people to look at a more suitable planting. It could be another tree or maybe a different type of garden that could be included in that area. So that could happen at a later date, but the immediate request, well, not request, but advice is that we would remove the tree. We certainly will advise the community and the adjoining neighbours because they take a particular interest in the gardens. I think they are big users of the garden, and probably our neighbourhood watch also over the facility as well. So we'll let them know through a letter drop.
Thank you, Manager. Really important if we can get on the front foot with the communications and the media around this, because no doubt we'll have comments flowing through about why did council take out that tree. But yeah, as you've provided there, the arborist's actual report, where the arborist says in their professional opinion the structural integrity of the tree is compromised. That's quite telling, isn't it? Yeah, thank you. Okay, so look, we've got the recommendation there that council receive the attached report on. That the committee accept the report for information. Do we have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Henson. Second to Councillor Duff. Any speakers? Question for Manager? Councillor Duff, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just want to know, with regards to that tree, and it's a shame that that tree has to be removed, but there was also some request from some community groups for those other trees that are pushing up through where we're going to put that shade shelter. Just wondering what's happening with those particular trees.
Yes, certainly. The trees will be removed where the shade structures are, but we can't remove the trees yet because there's such a delay in the material to replace the shade structures. So we're working with the group that's there, the Tai Chi. They're fully aware that the trees are just staying at the moment because they're providing some shade. But once we actually have the shade sails made and they're ready to be put back up, the trees would be removed because they rub on the shade sail, and yes, we'll remove them eventually. But just at the moment, if we were to remove them, it'll look pretty bland and they wouldn't have any shade. So, yeah.
Thank you, Manager. Thank you for your work in keeping on communicating with the Tai Chi group. Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you. Okay, righto, so we've got that moved and seconded, and thank you, Manager, for bringing that to council so that we can be aware of that as that work happens. Much appreciated. Councillor Shoemaker.
I just had a question. I was devastated to read the report and hear that our new roof potentially had been damaged after you'd put so much work into the new roof. I just wanted to understand in brief the extent of damage to the roof.
Yep, no structural damage, just on the surface really. So just some sheeting and some guttering needs to be replaced, and we have an insurance claim in for that, and we're just waiting on an outcome of that. We are finding that the insurance claims are taking significant time, and I assume that has a lot to do with the massive amount of claims that they've got across Queensland. So at some point it will come through, but the building is safe and there's no structural issues.
Thank you, Manager. Okay, shall we go to the vote? Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. 9.9, Land Investigation Review at 184. Keep rolling forward. Thank you, Manager.
Okay, councillors, we've got a very detailed report here for council consideration. Our Land Investigation Officer, Rebecca Baton, has pulled together this report. It has taken several months, but as you can see in the detail of the report, you can see why that she's needed to take her time and undertake the comprehensive investigations and to try to summarise it in a report that is meaningful for council. Yeah, I think she's done a very good job in preparing that here today for presentation. It may be that council happy to take questions. It could be that you may decide that we bring this back through some sort of presentation where you might like to have Rebecca here and we work through each of the individual sort of sections that's outlined. Yeah, but we have tried to go over what our land holdings are across the region, where there's significant land assets such as Pound Street, Cornish Street, for that sort of commercial and industrial land. There's land there that requires further investigation around drainage before some of that land is suitable to divest. There's residential land there, but there's servicing and connection sort of issues that we need to look at there. So they're noted for council. She has provided some detail on certain parcels of land where council might decide to go down that track and actually provide those services and then market those land assets for disposal. And, you know, if council wanted to do that, there's obviously costs involved and consideration around those costs before you wanted to go down that path, and she's tried to summarise that there for you. So happy to take questions unless you want us to go through the report in detail today.
Yes, thank you, Madge. If I could just start off, and I think we will go around the table and take questions and have a discussion. And I'm probably looking to recommend to council, to the committee, that we actually get something a bit more substantive up today to take to the ordinary in relation to page 192 at the top, land assets immediately available for use. So I might start with that section and then give all the other councillors an opportunity to go through their thoughts. 5.1, and can I say, this is a great report. I've read it in detail. Rebecca's done a tremendous job here in categorising all these different land assets and giving us a very good understanding of where we're at in terms of our ability to make these available for sale and what needs to be done to get to that point. So it's a great report. Would you please pass on our sincere thanks to her, because it really is excellent. So if we look at that, there's actually 5 properties there that she's indicated and recommended that council divest of the land assets immediately available for sale by offering on the open market by way of tender in the first instance. And then she goes on, okay, so of course what would happen after that, but of course tender in the first instance. So I just wanted to bring that to the committee's attention at the top of 192, so we can perhaps consider that today as to how we want to progress that. But anyway, that was it for me. Councillor Shoemaker.
Yes, certainly it's a wonderful report. I don't disagree with the sentiment, and I think Earl Street memorandum we have already actually put out to tender a couple of times. Yep. Cornish Street in Kingaroy, I do see potentially an opportunity. Would like to understand that one a little bit more for some sort of industrial park, or whether there could be, or the size of that, and whether there is an option for more industrial outcomes, like whether the entire parcel would be too much for an entity to maintain, or whether it is enough to support one use, or whether there could be multiple uses there. I'm not sure, but it does look like a lot of land, and certainly I know the transmission network's all been upgraded to meet manufacturing standards. So I think there could be an opportunity there with Cornish Street, and probably would like to understand it a little bit further. I really love the work that's gone into making the recommendations and scoping the different services and the cost of those, and then the consideration of what these properties would be worth on the open market, and whether, you know, you're making a sound decision to work forward through those things. And to be honest, Mr. Mayor, there's so much information here. I really would welcome an opportunity for and I know the calendar's full, but I think this is a really important project. Opportunity for a discussion with Rebecca to work through some of these things and actually decide as a council our immediate priorities and our long-term priorities, and certainly coming into a budget process, whether we need to actually considering starting some of these things, or considering what master planning might need to happen for opportunities like Cornish Street, if that is an option. So that's my thoughts. By all means, some of those immediate blocks, I'm supportive of, enabling the team to go ahead and do that. But I think that's sort of been happening anyway as the opportunities have presented themselves. So that's my thoughts. I'd really welcome and probably keen to put a motion up that we actually have a workshop to work through the material here.
Thank you, Councillor.
So I'm happy to move.
Yeah, Councillor. So let's shape up a resolution around that. But before we do, sorry, just on that point, can I just interject? Just on that 5.1, then, in light of Councillor's comments, Earl Street, we've been desperately trying to sell it. Bar Street and Blake Street, and I'm picking up on Councillor's comments in relation to the industrial land in Cornish Street, and probably Burrow Street would need more work, I'd imagine, around some looking at long-term plans from Council's point of view. But those first three residential lots, Bar Street and Blake Street, are they three that we could sort of say, well, we could actually just tick off and just, go to market if they've been to tender, or can we get some commentary on that so we can shape up a motion? Thank you.
Certainly. So 9 Bar Street and 15 Blake Street, we would bring back as a separate report for council to endorse, for them to be tendered for sale. So they would get a tick straight away, and we can do that at the next council, either this council meeting or the May one, and you would endorse that, and we could move on those two. You've already done that for Earl Street. So that's already...
So you're good to go with Earl Street, just those other two. So we'd leave that with you to bring back a future report. Yep. I'm comfortable with that. Yeah, thanks. That's great. Okay. Thanks, Councillor Shoemaker. We'll come back to you for a motion. Thank you.
Yes, I was just going to propose that council receive the attached report on council's land assets, and that a workshop be scheduled to work through the proposed recommendations and develop a shared methodology to progress the land investigation, what are we calling this, divestment strategy. Could I make that, sorry, to progress the review of council's land holdings and land divestment strategy. So just before, review of council's land holdings and divestment strategy. Thanks, Bree.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Potter, thank you. Any speakers on that? Leanne, if I could just, time frame, Leanne, to have that workshop. You've done a lot of work. It's just a matter of now us getting time to sit down and go through all your work.
We'll just have to find a space. It'll probably be... See, we've kept the Wednesday afternoons open for this sort of thing. It really just depends on when you finish these committees.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's not being cheeky. Better you could fold it in straight after a committee, because
I'd like
the other requested workshops, you'll notice with Michael and that, we're just folding them in under these committees. We've just got not a lot of other space to put them, unfortunately.
We'll see if we can find a Wednesday afternoon in coming weeks. Yeah, thanks, Mr. CEO. We'll leave that with you. Thank you. You're very good at keeping us organised. Thank you. Yeah. Councillor Duff, you had your light on. Anything further? Thank you.
Mayor, I'm just keen to progress. I know the workshop, the others, but I'm keen to progress the immediate putting on the sale for offer by tender of the first 5 here, because I was of the opinion that there was no land in Wandai Industrial Estate even available. There's been people wanting to purchased, like industrial land. In Proston, the same. There's people wanting to get. There's no more residential land available in Proston. We've got one here. I just think that we should get this happening straight away, as well as then have the workshop on the others, because there's certainly some things we need to do on the others. But I don't think we should wait until a workshop to get these others on the market.
Yeah, so, yeah, Mr CEO, please.
Mayor, that's not what I took out of the conversation. I've got a note here just as we'll bring a report back. We'll try our very best to get it to the March ordinary. So Earl Street's already been, the Highsville, Proston properties, with all power, if it's possible, there'll be individual reports brought to the March ordinary.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Mr CEO. That'll tick that box. Thank you very much. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Closing comments, Councillor Shoemaker, before we wrap up. Okay. Well, let's go to the vote. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. Thank you again, Manager. Please pass on our thanks, as I said, to Rebecca. Great work. We look forward to that workshop in coming weeks. Thank you. Okay. Rightio. So we've got some questions on notice now. 10.1, Cumbria facilities at 216. Let's get through these. We have a question on notice there in relation to some considered developments at Cumbria, and the response is as provided. I'm just going to get the page up here. My paperwork out of order, but anyway, what have we got there? Bree on the screen. So we had a question in relation by Councillor Duff, and it's recommended that be received and noted. Let's get that moved. Councillor Duff, happy to move that. Seconder, Councillor Potter, thank you. Speakers, Councillor Duff, are you comfortable with the response?
I'm comfortable with the response. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Good, thank you. So let's go to the vote on that one. Carried unanimously. Thank you all. 10.2 is in relation to the local grants and subsidies program, and it's recommended that the response to the question regarding the local grants and local government grants and subsidies program raised by Councillor Shoemaker be received and noted. Do we have a mover? Councillor Shoemaker, thank you. Seconded, Councillor Duff. Councillor Shoemaker, any comments on that? You're comfortable? Thank you. Let's go to the vote. Those in favour, carried unanimously. And the third item is Tabinga Cemetery Future Works, where we had a recommendation that the response to the question regarding Tabinga Cemetery requested by Mayor Otto be received and noted. I'm very comfortable with that. Thank you. Was that my question, was it? Okay, yeah. I know we've had some real discussions around this one, but yeah, very comfortable with the work that's happening there. Thank you, Manager. I've read that report. That's great. Okay, so I'll now move that be the recommendation. Do we have a seconder? Yes, Councillor Henson, thank you. Speakers, Councillor Shoemaker, thank you.
Yes, thank you. I had, we must have been thinking about the same things, Mr Mayor, because I had sent through some details which I see have been noted here as quite reasonable for inclusion in the master planning process, and that there is provision to do some of that reseal work for the central car park at Tabinga Cemetery in the 22-23 year. I just know we were going to catch up, and then we sort of thought there was works happening. I just wanted to understand some of the things I highlighted was around the new lawn cemetery part. There's actually no trees in the lawn cemetery, so at the moment it's quite awful in comparison to the older part of the cemetery, which has those beautifully established trees. So I know they'll be included in the master plan. I just wanted to understand sort of the time frame for that, because some of these things, like some trees and some seeding and some resealing, I am a little bit worried about I know the extensions on the cards, but where we're currently driving through the cemetery, the hearse is actually driving over the new part of the lawn cemetery and over plots that have been sold or that are actually marked graves. So there's actually a worn dirt track in there. So we've actually got one recent funeral that was had in that area that's, they basically set up over that dirt area, which I just think isn't good. So I just was trying to understand the time frame for the master planning process, and I'm mindful some of these things are only very small projects. If there can be a bit of an update.
Thank you, Manager.
Well, the timeframe wouldn't solve those problems immediately, and perhaps what you're identifying is worth addressing right now, if it's a concern, and perhaps just meeting there and looking at those interim things, because the master plan will take a long time and it'll take money to implement it. So if there's issues that are a concern and operational and can be fixed in light of future works, that's no problem. We can do that. So.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe a meeting on site would be really good, just to have a look at some of these things and to understand coming into budget whether, some of them are only very small fixes, but I'm mindful of how important our cemeteries are to our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, are we ready to go to the vote on this one? Yes, those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. 10.4, Great Barrier Reef Protection Regulations question, and it's recommended that the response to the question regarding Great Barrier Reef regulations raised by Councillor Shoemaker be received and noted. Do we have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Shoemaker. Second to Councillor Henson. Councillor Shoemaker, any further comments on that? Thank you.
Yeah, no, I've certainly found this information myself. I guess I was probably more interested in council, if there was actually it's not uncommon for the state government to adopt legislation and then give council a role in that. So I just was probably more keen to understand if we had a direct requirement to support this legislation, but it seems from the information provided that we don't, but I just wanted to confirm.
Thank you, General Manager.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so no, this is administered by the state. So yeah, we don't have a direct involvement in the licensing, because the activities like grazing or in new horticulture areas, they'll be occurring on rural land, which is as of right from a council planning scheme. So from our point, they're okay.
Thank you, General Manager. Let's go. Oh, sorry, Councillor Henson. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, just quickly, I would really encourage councillors to read this document, Reef Water Quality. There's so many things that, honestly, it will be ongoing, and some of the implications there, and it's well explained there, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's for the betterment of our primary producers or our region. But I'd certainly encourage people to read that report. It's very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Okay, so we'll go to the vote. Those in favour, carried unanimously. Thank you all. 11, let's move on now. Final item 11. The recommendation is that Council considers the confidential reports listed below in a meeting closed to the public in accordance with Section 254J of the Local Government Regulation 2012. 11.1, Material Change of Use, 592 Morgans Road, Windra. And the Council is satisfied that discussion on this matter in open meeting would on balance be contrary to the public interest, as it deals with legal advice obtained by the local government or legal proceedings involving the local government, including, for example, legal proceedings that may be taken by or against the local government. That is Section 254J-E. And 11.2, South Burnett Sporting Shooters Request for Land Shooting Range, Section 254J-G of the Local Government Regulation. Council is satisfied that discussion on this matter in an open meeting would, on balance, be contrary to the public interest, as it deals with negotiations relating to a commercial matter involving the local government, for which a public discussion would be likely to prejudice the interests of the local government. Do we have a mover? Councillor Shoemaker. Second to Councillor Jones. Any speakers? Concerns? No. We'll go to the vote. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. We'll now close the open meeting and go into confidential committee as at 1:40 p.m. Thank you. Okay, we're back in open council, and we have two matters to attend to. 11.1, material change of use, 592 Morgans Road, Windra. It's recommended that the report be received and noted. Do we have a mover? Councillor Duff. Second to Councillor Henson. Speakers? Those in favour? Carried unanimously. 11.2, South Burnett Sporting Shooters Request for Land Shooting Range. It's recommended that the committee recommend to council that council continue to liaise with the South Burnett Branch of Shooters Union in relation to identification of a suitable site for the establishment of shooting range within the region. Do we have a mover? Councillor Potter, seconder Councillor Henson. Speakers, those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. I'll now call the meeting closed at 2:22 p.m. Thank you all for your attendance and involvement. Have a great rest of day.